The Meeples and Miniatures podcast is sponsored by Two Fat Lardies, Miniature War Games with Battle Games magazine, and by the generous donations of you, the listener. So, many thanks to Alex McIntosh, Glenn Oberhauser, Tom Pivotera, Daniel Schmidt, and David Blood. Guys, thanks again so much for your donations. The Meeples and Miniatures podcast, episode 161. War and Empire, with hosts Neil Shuck and Mike Hobbs, and guests Andy Cooper and Antony Spencer. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Meeples and Miniatures podcast. I'm Neil Shuck, and once again I'm joined by Mike Hobbs. Hi, Mike.
Hello.
Hi, how you doing?
Very well.
Good. Haven't been blown away or washed away, have we?
No, like I say, live on the side of a mountain, all the water runs down. So I'm okay. If I get flooded, most of Britain is completely knackered.
Indeed, we were out in Tractorland. I was out in Tractorland on Sunday. It was a bit, it was a bit wild and windy.
You don't want to get caught in Evesham, especially when it's raining. They get cut off for weeks down there.
Yeah, luckily not this time. Not this time. Yeah, mind you, having said that, being trapped with the Wyvern War Gamers wouldn't have been too bad. But
yeah, I think of your liver.
Yeah, there is that. Yeah. It's been a bit wet, wild and windy in the UK. We're middle of the country, so we kind of escaped the worst of it. But yeah, so on today's show, what are we doing today? Well, main part of the show, we've got an interview that we recorded last week, wasn't it? Was it last week? Yeah, last week. I mean, well, we recorded this on the 9th of December, and it's coming out pretty straight away. So an early Christmas present, primarily because there's a couple of things we want to kind of promote before they finish at the weekend, and it just means that everything's done and dusted and it's all sorted. But yeah, so we spoke to, well, as we alluded to on the end of the last show, Andy Cooper and Antony Spencer, all about War and Empire. And so you've got quite a long interview coming up. Actually, I think we were kind of pleasantly surprised, weren't we?
Yeah, we had a really good chat.
Yeah, we did.
Very nice. So covered lots of things.
Indeed. So be warned. 2 hours and 14 minutes. So of that coming up. So settle yourself in for a long and hopefully entertaining conversation with Andy, and especially Antony, who was brilliant, absolutely great. So thanks to the both of them, and you'll be hearing from them very shortly. In the meantime, just a couple of things to cover just before Christmas. I mean, obviously we'll come on to a couple of things after the interview as well, but we just want to catch up on a couple of bits of hobby news and a couple of bits of things we've been up to. I suppose hobby news first.
Hobby news, yes.
There's loads of stuff coming out at the moment.
It's been a busy time. Yeah, I got hold of Iron Cross last night. I can do the flicky thing like you did last time.
Yeah, very hot off the press.
Yeah.
Yep.
I got it before the postman picked him up.
Yeah, so just as they came into Great Escape, you were there to nick one out of Stuart's hands. Is that what you're saying?
Pretty much, yeah. That's literally. I walked in, they were on the table. I went, "Oh," he went, "Here's yours." So I got mine. He actually gave me a bit of a row because I did a pre-order. You're like, "Why you do pre-order? Just come and get off you." I said, just to upset Annie, really.
I did notice that she was a little upset with you on Twitter about that.
She doesn't like me buying stuff from anybody else.
So, yeah, is she a bit of a possessive, a bit of a possessive retailer?
She is a very possessive. As soon as Annie gets a customer, that's it. She doesn't let go.
Yeah, she's like a Rottweiler.
Yeah. I mean,
that's it.
Even though at that point she wasn't actually selling the rules, it didn't matter apparently.
Oh right.
Yeah. That's what comes of Annie and Stu both sharing an office.
But yeah, I mean, and what's more, we're in it, aren't we?
Yeah.
Well, you're in it twice.
Yeah. Special thanks to various people, me and Meeples and Miniatures.
Meeples and Miniatures. So we're in it together, and then you're in it all on your own.
Yeah, I'm trying to work out why. I didn't really do anything. Honestly, I did nothing at all to smoke, other than turn around and tell people they're quite good. But I'll take it.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So I mean, yeah. Thank you to Stuart for the mention.
Yes,
and,
very kind of him.
There you go. So what are they like?
Nice.
How different? Okay, so how different are they to the beta that we'd seen?
I don't know because I didn't see the beta. I didn't get one of those.
Did you not? Oh, okay.
No.
Right. Okay, so that's a completely useless question.
I can say it's more physical than the beta.
Oh, shocking indeed.
Yeah, it's a lot easier to hold in your hand.
How big is it? Page count wise and stuff.
It is 32 pages, so it's nicely condensed in. There's no real massive loads of fluff. It is basically it's a rule book. It's 32 pages of rules. The rules cover the first 14 pages, and then we've got 6 or 7 orders of battle. So just doing the standard ones.
Yeah.
And then the last sort of 10 pages is scenarios. So yeah, it's all there. Nice and compact.
And similar
and
sort of,
very pretty.
Say similar sort of thing to Second Edition Sword and Spear. Because I'm assuming you've seen Second Edition Sword and Spear now.
Yes, I have got that.
Yeah.
Well, it's different typeface and different layouts and stuff, but it's a nice clean set of rules, nice pictures in it. No, it looks good. I'm gonna have a good read. I haven't had much of a read through, to be honest with you, because I've been busy. And I only got yesterday, but I should be having a read through over the weekend. And but yeah, it looks good.
Yeah, and the other thing that was a bit of a surprise. Well, I mean, one of several other things. I mean, as I say, we got things like the second Frostgrave. Was it Thor the Lich Lord or whatever it is?
Yeah, that's come out.
That's come out, and that's been immensely popular. I saw a tweet, not a tweet, a blog post from Joe McCullough. I was really impressed with just how well Frostgrave has done, because he mentioned in there that apparently it's now Osprey's third biggest selling set of rules behind Field of Glory and Bolt Action. And it sold about 10,000 copies or so.
Blimey.
So it's not bad going, is it?
That's pretty damn good, isn't it?
It is, isn't it? It is. Yeah. That's quite impressive. So yeah, it's as I say, at the moment, everywhere you look on a lot of hobby pages, it's everywhere, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It's it's just one of these set of rules that just seems to have piqued the public's imagination. It's just gone off. Lots of people playing there, a lot of people enjoying it, which is good.
Indeed. So that's all coming out, and loads of people getting on board with that, and then and obviously in conjunction with Frostgrave. If you remember, obviously when we were talking to last couple of times, we talked to Stu and we talked to Annie. They were talking about the Iron Man painting, the charity auction. And the painting day, and last time on the Iron Cross show when we spoke to Stu, he was saying, well, okay, it's all got to be done, and so by the time you heard the show, it probably everything would have been done and dusted. Actually, they've been a bit delayed in getting the auction up, and one of the reasons for kind of rushing this show out is the fact that the auctions are currently on at the moment.
They are indeed, and they have. Time of speaking, 3 days and 22 hours left.
So date and time that they finish?
Sunday at about 6:30 GMT.
Okay, so that's Sunday, the 13th of December.
Yep.
Which hopefully by the time you're listening to this, just gives you day, couple of days, maybe a few hours to come up. So just to reiterate what we've got, there is a Frostgrave bundle.
Yeah, but I mean, we can gloss past that one. Let's get straight on to the
no. Okay, right. First off, yeah. Look, we can have this competition conversation in a second.
It's not a contest.
It's not a contest.
It's not a contest.
Hang on. If it's not a contest, does that mean you're currently not in the lead?
It's not a contest.
If you want the links, there are 2 links currently on the Meeples and Miniatures blog that I posted up on, I think it was Monday. It was either the weekend or Monday, which links to there's a Frostgrave bundle, which is 2 painted warbands, and then rules, some counters. I think there's a bit of foreground scenery in there, isn't there?
Yeah, she put one of the room builders in there. The Frostgrave rulebook is apparently signed by Joe as well.
Signed by Joe, so a rare signed copy from Joe. And what's that currently going for?
As we're speaking, it's currently up for £107.
£107. So there you go. So it's currently £107. Now, apparently, I mean that's a pretty good deal because apparently they reckon there's about £100 worth of stuff in there, isn't there?
Yeah,
don't they? Something like
is.
that. So £107 for 2 fully painted warbands plus all the other goodies. In a bad deal. So go and have a look at that. So that's a Frostgrave one. So of course the second warband on offer is
Vastly superior, I'd say.
Vastly superior. Is that right? Okay.
Yeah.
So tell us all about this wondrous second offering.
No, the second offering, which I've got to say, I mean, much I like Frostgrave, even though I don't like the D20 mechanic, but we'll go past that. Otherworld, it's such a more open fantasy skirmish system, and you get the in this particular lovely auction, you get the book and all the tokens, the card decks. You get 2 pencils and other things like that.
2 pencils as well.
2 black Otherworld pencils. All the cool kids are using the black Otherworld pencils. Oh. And then of course 2 warbands. So you've got a nice set of adventurers. Mm-hmm. So there's a 7-man adventurer team, and then a bunch of drow with some driders. And let me tell you, trying to paint a bunch of drow when you've had very little sleep for 24 hours really does mess with your mind. Especially if you don't like spiders.
I was going to say, painting the spiders, yeah. I bet you were dreaming about them, weren't you? So, how is that particular auction going on at the moment?
Well, that's due at a very respectable £90. Although there's about 120 quid's worth, I think.
Yeah.
In pure lead and rules and stuff.
But as you say, ages to go yet.
Ages ago yet.
Ages to go yet. But it's a bargain to be had.
It is, yes, and it's not a contest.
It's not a contest at all, is it?
No, because all the money's going to charity.
Indeed.
However, I really would like to beat Annie on this one. So, please.
So at least you can turn around and say I've beaten Annie at something.
Yeah.
Superb. So there you go. Yes, 2 charity auctions. Links are on the blog page from an update a few days ago. But check them out. Finishing. So what time again was it on Sunday?
About 6:30 p.m.
Okay, 6:30 GMT. 6:30 in the evening. That is GMT on the 13th of December.
Although you could get up early and bid at 6:30 if you wanted to. Get up 6 in the morning and bid. Put a nice big hefty bid in on the Otherworld one.
Indeed. Go and have a look. Have a bid, and good luck to everyone.
Yeah.
One other thing to flag up just before we go away to the interview, and that was the fact that another set of rules actually came out today.
Yeah.
Although I think it was I saw a tweet yesterday and kind of went, oh. Didn't realise they were out, and went over to the site and they weren't out, but they appeared kind of overnight US time. So they were available first thing this morning, so I snapped them up. And that is Aurelian from Sam Mustafa.
Yes.
Yeah, you remember, obviously, back in episode 154, if I remember rightly, we were chatting with Sam. And one of the things we managed to talk about was this new set of Ancients rules that he was working on, called Aurelian. And lo and behold, they're out. Now, we had heard, or when we spoke to him, he was hoping that there was a possibility that they'd come out both jointly as a set of rules and the board game. I understood from chatting to Will Townsend in October that there was a few issues. They were having a few issues with that, and then next thing you know, Sam releases a podcast which basically explained the fact that he was going to be releasing Aurelian as a PDF only.
Yeah, no, that's an interesting one.
I mean, I don't know if you sat and listened to it. It was quite interesting because yeah, I mean, it's the first time he's done that. But I mean, one of the things he was actually saying was actually that getting to a point where releasing something as a set of rules like he normally does, it's actually getting to the point where, especially shipping it abroad, it's beginning to get problematic for American publishers. Basically, due to the amount of the amount it costs to ship abroad from the States. I am pretty ignorant of general US shipping costs, but I think a lot of things now, it basically boils down to it's $25 a shot or something like that. So it's certainly not cheap to ship out of the US, which from listening to his podcast, it was one of the things, and also obviously getting the whole thing printed and everything in the first place, he was kind of thinking, well, actually, that overhead is beginning to get a little problematic. So he thought he'd just and also, if he went through that, it was going to be at least another 6 months before this would see the light of day. So he made the decision that it was going to be PDF only, and then turned around and said, well, because it was PDF, it lets him indulge himself, because then he could actually write a whole section on the history, and which basically kind of explains why he did this set of rules in the first place, because he was interested by the history. And he said, well, he actually basically gave himself rein to write a history essay within this within this set of rules, which if he was just producing a set of rules, he probably wouldn't have done. So yeah, but it's very interesting decision.
Yeah,
to go PDF only.
Really hope it comes off him.
Yeah, yeah. But I mean, I picked those up this morning. They are $29.99, which works out about £20. 100 pages. And for the PDF, when you buy the PDF, you actually get two different versions. You get a printer-friendly version, and then you get the full-on,
tablet version.
Tablet version, yeah. But it's the full-on artwork, but it's actually got all the tablet links in as well. So you get two different versions, very well put together, and yeah, it looks really interesting. And then what they've done, what he's done, he's put up a whole load of downloads. As when he came on the show and spoke, this is a completely diceless game. So it's all card driven. So all the cards are available to download in a document online. So there's one document that has all the cards in it. Although he has also done a deal with a print-on-demand company in the US where you can actually order a card deck. I think that works out about $20 plus shipping.
That might be worth doing. Is getting the cards.
Yeah. I mean, there is a potential that you could. There is a potential that you could get. I mean, depending on shipping cost. If you bought them outside the States, it might be easier getting them done elsewhere. It very much boils down to how much shipping is. But I think the cards themselves, and basically it's a company that produces them in poker card quality, playing card quality, plus the size and stuff. And so I think again that works out about another $20 or so plus shipping. But there is a link on Sam's website. That's all there and available. You get the cards, and there's also an appendix. Which includes a introductory scenario. It includes, in the same way that they produce cards for Blucher. The units are represented by can be represented by cards in Aurelian, and the appendix does actually have the cards that you will need. I mean, basically, what he's done is produced one sheet because there's only 4 armies. There's the Romans, there's the Sarmatians, there's the Persians, and there's the Germanic tribes. So each of those has has a set of unique cards on it, and there's one of each type of unit. So you need multiple copies of this. Okay, you need to print multiple copies, but they are available as a download. And it even includes things like some top-down photos for scenery and various other bits and pieces. So, just by downloading the appendix and printing out a few bits and pieces, you can actually get cracking and get playing for a relatively minimal outlay. So it's all there. It looks does look really interesting. I haven't had much chance to have much more than a cursory flick through it, but it's already kind of going. Yeah, that's interesting. That's got some good stuff, and it's obviously it's also got it's got some rules and some ideas for how to represent it in using figures, and that's something we want to come on to in a bit. Yeah. So yeah, it's and say that is literally come out today, 9th of December. So it's on Sam Mustafa's website. If you just type in Sam Mustafa Aurelian, you'll find it in Google. Well worth a look. It's a very nicely produced book. So we can talk about that in some depth in the new year.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, it should be good. Right. Shall we get our guest on then?
We shall get our guest on. Okay, so like we said, we recently caught up with Andy Cooper and Antony Spencer. Andy, obviously, hopefully no introduction is needed, from Westwind Productions and Forged in Battle. Antony is the author of the new War and Empire rules, and you'll find out all about that in the next couple of hours.
I must get through to Sergeant Watson's position. Jenkins, cover me.
Sir. Whoa.
Sergeant Watson, bring your men in. Withdraw.
It's all right, sir. We're enjoying ourselves.
What?
Yes, sir. It's these here chain of command rules, sir. We're having great fun.
Chain of command?
That's right, sir. It's a challenging but fun blend of command and control. It gives me the freedom I want to fight the way I want to. Never had so much fun, sir.
And we've cooked you some sausages.
Can't be helped, sir. Me and the lads are staying put.
Chain of Command World War II platoon level rules from Two Fat Lardies. They really put you in control. And they're even better than sausages.
We're very pleased to welcome back to the Meeples and Miniatures podcast Andy Cooper from Westwind Productions. Hello, Andy.
Hello, Neil.
Good to have you back on, mate. Good to speak to you again.
Yeah, nice to speak to you too.
And we're also joined by Antony Spencer. Hello, Antony.
Hi, Neil. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. As we mentioned previously, a long-time listener, and I was actually listening to quite a few of the shows over the weekend while working very hard at the keyboard. Cool. Well,
thank you for listening, and welcome to the show. And it's good to chat. Now we're talking to Andy and Antony today. We're finding out what's been happening with Westwind, and we're also going to be discussing. As part of that, we're going to be discussing the War and Empire rules that Antony has actually been writing. So lots to get into. So we'll crack straight on. So Antony, as a long-time listener, obviously you'll be used to this question, or used to other people asking this question now. As a first-time guest on the show, we'd like to find out a little bit about you and what your gaming background is. So do you want to fill us in a little bit on how you got into gaming?
I've been gaming for 40 plus years. probably most wargamers started out with the collection of air-fixed soldiers, World War II, predominantly tanks. Used to line them up on opposite sides of the room, throw pieces of plasticine and things like that, and see who was the last army standing. That'd be the winner, and gradually the games would graduate and terrain would get involved, and that was probably my sort of the first few years of doing that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And then really I sort of moved on when I discovered, I think it was the old Citadel miniature shop in Manchester.
Oh, right.
And began to pick up some of their sci-fi and fantasy ranges. Did a little bit of Dungeons and Dragons, but I always enjoyed being more the sort of dungeon master and designing dungeons rather than being the adventurer.
A man after my own heart, yes.
Yeah, I was fortunate because I had a captive audience in my younger brother. He actually enjoyed being an adventurer with some of his friends. So I used to set up dungeons for them and tapes with them, and that was sort of many a Saturday afternoon carried away doing that sort of thing. And then with the sci-fi figures, actually developed our own rules. We used to create sort of Lego cities, and then just had sort of very fairly simple rules which we'd fight round. And it probably wasn't until I got given Paddy Griffiths' Napoleonic Wargaming for Fun that I really got into sort of the more serious sort of historical wargaming. And my first two armies were a French and British army, just made of card, which I'd cut up and made the symbols for infantry and cavalry, and used to fight solo battles with them. And then just really graduated on through the Warhammer years and the Warhammer 40k years, but also in the background of doing all of those was developing the historical armies around sort of Napoleonics and English Civil War and Ancients a long time ago. And it's just gone on from there really to lots of soldiers, lots of different projects, and a very forgiving wife.
Don't we all?
Yes, definitely.
I was about to say that, yeah.
Okay, so first introduction to historicals, Napoleonics, and you say lots of soldiers. So how big is your lead pile?
Too big. Actually, no, it's the wrong answer, actually. Not big enough. It's very big. And it has changed over the years as things have moved out and things have moved in. I think currently, the lead pile covers, or lead stroke plastic pile covers 54, millimeter World War II for playing the, Normandy firefight rules through to, 3 or 4 6 millimeter Napoleonic armies for, fighting, sort of an alternative history campaign in Italy around, the Battle of Maida, 1805, 1806. Yeah. Where the British and the Russians are on the Italian mainland, fighting the French. And then I've got Saga armies, Dust, Gladiator armies, quite a big Lord of the Rings collection. I think Lord of the Rings, particularly when Games Workshop just went berserk because there were just so many troops to buy and so many armies to create. And it's, one of the games when I went to a friend's house, because there didn't seem to be many war games when I was younger, he actually had a beautiful, replica of Helm's Deep. And he was using the, I think it was South East London War Games, Middle Earth Battles, I think it was called.
Oh, okay.
And I played a game with him, and ever since I've done that, Lord of the Rings has always been one of the things that I've always wanted to do as a war gamer. And then obviously when Games Workshop got the license, went berserk, and that's a very big lead and plastic mountain that I'm still working through.
Cool. Sounds good to me.
It sounds about normal.
Yeah,
yeah, it does. Yeah, so much so. I mean, I did have a fairly large shed at the bottom of the garden, sort of like 12 foot by sort of 10 foot, but that's recently been replaced by a 20 foot by 10 foot workshop, which I'll be in the process of boarding out and putting electrics in to be the new new wargaming heaven.
Oh, that sounds good to me. That definitely sounds good to me. Yeah, as somebody who's basically had to borrow a mate's front room to do similar sort of thing. Yeah, that sounds really good. That sounds really cool. Well, we shall have to come back and find out how you get on with that. That sounds like a really good project. Okay, so thanks for that. And Andy, it's, as I say. Oh, I'm just trying to think. Last time we spoke, it was back in. It was about this time last year, wasn't it?
Well, possibly, or it might have been Salute when I last saw you, Neil.
Oh yeah. I mean, that was the last time we really kind of caught up with each other, face to face. How is life in Westwind?
It's good. Yeah, it's good. So what can you say? It's just miniature making little men, casting them and moulding them and getting them out and getting the ideas together and getting them rocking and rolling, really.
I know you've been working through some Forged in Battle releases recently, and I was actually asked by another listener to ask you a question about Forged in Battle, and that was, when are you releasing your 8th Army and DAC infantry?
Oh, right, okay, the infantry sets.
Yeah, because he said, yeah, it's great. It's great getting all the vehicles and artillery, but where do we get the infantry?
Where's the infantry? Well, I can tell you that they're done. They're all done. All the machine guns, the mortars, the platoon sets, everything for both Africa Corps and 8th Army. But they're off with Ruben in. I think he might be in Norway at the moment. Oh, Finland. Sorry, he's in Finland. The guy is Ruben Torregosa. He's a brilliant painter, Spanish lad. But he's doing a degree, or a master's degree in biochemistry, I think, in Finland. So he does all our painting. He's just the best painter. So he's taken all our stuff to Finland with him. So while it's cold over there, he's going to be painting them up over the Christmas sort of break. So we should see them in January.
So once we get painted examples and stuff, that hopefully we'll get to see them. And they'll be available in the new year.
We try and get everything painted on the World War II stuff to get it in there. No, not so much on the ancient stuff because there's that much of it. He can't keep up.
Considering how big the War and Empire Kickstarter was, it got to be quite prolific, didn't it?
Yeah, well, it was huge. Yeah, it went massive. Yeah, it was kind of bigger than we expected it, really. But got to go with it.
I can swear to that. As the person who filled a lot of the blisters before Salute, it's a big range.
Yeah, it is.
As a person who's bought 3 armies, it's a big range.
It is.
Yeah.
It's actually, I think I was responsible for actually growing by at least one code, because I think during the summer, Andy was, last summer, Andy was sculpting away, and we were working on the army lists. And I think at the time, it was the Etruscan army list. I was going through it and putting it together, and matching it up against the master list of what Andy was working to and what units were going to be produced. Mm-hmm. And I'd come across the entry for Etruscan cavalry, and so I said, oh, we haven't got that. Ran round to Andy and said, we need Etruscan cavalry for the Etruscan army. And then, lo and behold, the master produced the figures for it, and a new code came out.
Yep, Etruscans, yeah. I remember them. Yeah, well, we're always adding bits and pieces in, aren't we? If you say Carthage to me, I'll just make more Carthage. I love Carthaginians.
You look at the Carthaginian army, and it's such a smorgasbord of different bits and pieces, isn't it?
Oh, you can have anything in it. Yeah, that's the beauty of it, isn't it? So if you start with Carthaginians, you can build Spanish, you can build Celts, you can build you got the Etruscan bits and pieces like that, Italian allied stuff, Numidians, all that kind of stuff. So it's a real good starting point.
Yeah, good stuff. So, obviously, as part of the whole War and Empire thing, now, okay, let's just take one step backwards and just to clarify with people who maybe haven't come across War and Empire before, I've been hiding somewhere for the past 18 months and have no idea what War and Empire is. Can you just explain where you've got to so far with War and Empire?
So, War and Empire Part 1 was a miniatures range that covered Alexandrian Macedonian, Punic Wars, right up to sort of just before the first century, so it's Caesarian Rome and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
I think there's 23 different armies in that you can build from the sort of bits and pieces. You could probably put some more together if you use your imagination. And when we ran that Kickstarter, we said we'd develop a rule set to go along with the miniatures.
Yeah.
And we have been doing that. So we're actually on version 3 now of the rule set, which Antony's writing.
Version 3, so what kind of happened to versions 1 and 2?
Version 1, we broke that down. It wasn't what we needed. So we took the pieces from that worked for us, and we had another author. He wrote version 2. that didn't work for us. So we took the parts from part 1, part 2, and Antony's put them together. We sat and brainstormed it for months. And we think that this is the rule set that we wanted to put together initially. Yeah, this is what we wanted to do.
Right.
So now we come to War and Empire. It's not called Glory of Rome anymore because when I checked, that's a trademarked title used by a computer games company. So we can't use Glory of Rome. So it's now called Legions of Rome.
Right.
Yeah, you got to when you're going on Kickstarter, make sure you check the international trademark registration. So, Legions of Rome is kind of it picks up where the first War and Empire finished. It's going to start with the Augustans. It's going to go through the early 1st century Romans, right up to the 2nd century. We've just decided to add 3rd century because lots of people have been asking for 3rd century Romans because apparently people don't make a lot of them in 15 now.
Okay.
Yeah. And we're going to do, hopefully, if we can get through, if we can raise enough funds, we'll be doing, we want to do Picts, Saxons, Franks, Dacians, Sassanids, and a few other ones that we've kind of got lined up.
Right. So, but you're going to end up with things like, especially I suppose if you're going to 3rd century, you're potentially going to end up with things like the Visigoths and all that mob as well.
Yeah, possibly. I can hint at that,
yeah.
So
that's what we're up to. The Kickstarter's ready, it's all prepared. It's been accepted by Kickstarter, and the launch date is this Saturday at 12 noon in the UK GMT.
Okay, so through the wonders of radio, it will have launched.
It will have already launched.
It would have launched 2 weeks before you hear this.
Yeah.
How long? How long is it running for?
So it runs up until about the 22nd of December, 23rd of December.
22nd of December. Okay, so obviously at the time this is published, guys, you've got about a week left to go and have a look at this.
Yeah.
Okay, so similar sort of format to what we saw with the first Kickstarter?
Yeah, we've improved all our explanations and our layout and stuff like that. So, but if you took part in the first one, you'll be familiar with how it's going to work.
So, initial armies are Augustan, the archetypal early Imperial Roman army is the first thing you're starting with, yeah?
Yes, yeah. Well, no, we actually the entire thing is that the beginning of the Kickstarter covers the Augustans right through to the 2nd century stuff. So those, I think, the 46 codes that we want to get done initially, and that is what our initial funding is looking at covering.
Oh, right. So initial funding is covering Romans, first and 2nd century.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. And then obviously we'll see where we go from there.
Yeah. That's the plan.
And of course, if it's anything like the first one, you'll just keep going until you run out of ideas.
We will.
Or history.
Yeah, we did run out of history actually, because we kind of bumped into that sort of about 1st century barrier, which we didn't want to. That was a whole new Kickstarter, really.
Yeah. Which, funnily enough, is what you're doing now.
Yeah. Yeah, and hopefully, if this one goes over, then we'd look at doing late Roman and Dark Ages.
Yeah. I was going to say at the point where you suddenly start hitting, the Saxons and stuff, you're going to think, hang on a second.
Yeah, just try and do like nice, easy 400-year sections, really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's the rules, right? I have to say, some of this feels like Xenophon's March to the Sea. Because if it was successful, you're thinking, oh my God, that's yet more army lists and things I've got to develop to go with the rules.
We'll get caught up eventually.
Eventually, yes.
Yeah. Which is a brilliant segue into, actually, because obviously it wasn't just a miniatures range you were developing. As you've already said, we were developing a rule set to go alongside it, and we're now on version 3. So, can you kind of introduce us into what is version 3 of War and Empire?
I'll leave that up to you.
You're going to leave that one to me. I think as Andy mentioned, it is the 3rd iteration of the War and Empire rules. And it does take certain building blocks from the first two iterations, because there were things within those that we liked. But I think through conversations, quite a few conversations Andy and I had, and I think particularly sort of Andy was, it didn't fit with his vision of a rule set that he was looking for. Mm-hmm. So what we really did is we actually sat down and talked about what wasn't working with those two sets. So I think the very first premise is we weren't looking to develop a set of ancient rules that basically create a simulation, historical, to the nth degree, historically accurate simulation of an ancient battle with all the minutiae. What we were looking for was to actually create a game set in the classical period.
Right.
So but it has to feel right. And I think that was the big thing that was coming through from a lot of what Andy was saying, that it still had to feel right, even though it was a game. But we didn't want to get too caught down in sort of the old WRG thinking of, how you form a unit, how many men are in the unit, that sort of thing. I think the other thing we were also looking to do was, in the back of it was to take away some of the certainty that a lot of games have in them, as in the certainty of, this is I know when I'm going to do a charge, this is how I know a combat will be, and therefore I can virtually predict what the results are going to be. Yeah. So we wanted a game that created a little more chaos and allowed a more free-form approach within boundaries. So that there are phases, but how you work within those phases is very much controlled. It's always about how the player wants to do something. And I think the other thing as well is that we wanted quite a bit of unpredictability. Things don't always end. Sorry, Andy, go on.
So we wanted people to feel confident that they could, that certain troop types will do quite well against certain other troop types. With it, but we always wanted that opportunity for those, your rubbish stuff to actually either hold or have a really thin chance of winning, against a Roman legion or whatever it is you're fighting against.
Yeah, I can't understand what you're saying because especially depending on certain rules, almost seem a little bit rock paper scissors, don't they? In the case of if you have a particular type of unit and you're facing off against another particular type of unit, the outcome is almost guaranteed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's what we were looking to try and do through some of the elements of the game, but particularly that's where you're entering somewhere like the close combat area, is that it's the balance of probability means that a close order, heavily armored unit will be a levy militia unit, but, and obviously that's why we use dice in our games, but the Hollywood moment can happen. Where all of a sudden it's all turned on its head, because I think in some ways as gamers, sometimes what we tend to remember about the games that we play is the Hollywood moments. Do you remember when you were in that position with your Praetorian Guard and you threw 3 1s? And I threw 3 6s with, my plebeians, that sort of thing. And you remember those, and those are the things that people talk about afterwards and later on over a glass of beer or, next time they meet up to play a game the following week. So we wanted to be able to do that. And also we wanted to be able to, move away from the players can control everything. And you have to take judgments. You have to decide who you want to move, when you want to move, are you going to move? But we also wanted them to, there is a feature within the rules, around the units we call animus, which could be deemed morale. But in a lot of games, morale's quite static. It sort of sits there and it's lots of modifiers. But what we have with animus is it's in essence, it's a living thing. It can go up and down during the course of the game. But players get the ability through their commanders to be able to raise that animus back to a level to make sure that people can pass what we call the animus test, and that's a test they have to take maybe to do certain things, to obey orders, to charge into combat, not to run away if they lose a combat. So we wanted the players to feel involved. And I think the other thing, one of the other key principles, and I think it's coming out in lots of games, is we didn't didn't want I go, you go.
Right.
So we want players to be involved in the game. So while I'm doing something as an active general, the player on the other side of the table knows he can do something as well. Or it's we wanted a game where a player can be involved all the time, as much as they possibly can. So there is very much a sort of an alternating process in the sort of what we call the order phase, where units are moved. And once you've done all of that, and then it moves into the sort of the traditional sort of shooting and combat phases, but everybody fights and everybody fires in those phases, and all the results are applied at the end of them, and that's when you sort of take the game through from there.
Yeah, it's like it's more like a chain of events, isn't it, than turns.
Right. Okay, so before we jump into sort of the turn sequence and some of the mechanics, it might be worth just having a quick overview of sort of sizes of things. So we know it's aimed at 15 mil.
It says yes.
Obviously, it's an ancient up to.
Well, hang on. Can I clarify that? Although, yeah, it's aimed at War and Empire range. Is it a game that's aimed at a specific scale, or is it one of these things that it's an element based game?
It's in essence, it's an element-based game. So at the end of the day, unashamedly, it's written in support of the War and Empire miniature range.
But
you can use any figures with it. I think basically, as long as each side is using the same unit frontages, and we will actually have an element of the rules which will cover that. It will say this is how you use other figures with this. So you can use 25 mil, 28 mil figures, or you can go down to 6 mils.
Okay, cool. Thanks for that.
Which always brings me back to my favourite question, which is basing standards. From what I've seen, because you've been really kind, you sent us a very early version of the rules, and it looks like units are made up of multiple bases.
Yes, they are.
And do those bases get removed?
There is, yes. During the course of a turn, a battle, units can lose bases. So when they're being shot at in the shooting phase, there is the possibility they can lose the base. When there is a close combat, again, there are possibilities that bases can be lost. So a unit its combat efficiency can diminish in two ways. One is through it will lose a number of bases, and when it loses more than half of its bases, in essence, the unit is now combat ineffective and will be removed from the table. The other way that a unit becomes combat ineffective is if its animus reduces to 0, and when it reduces to 0, in essence, it loses its will to continue. It loses its will to advance, to engage the enemy, to obey orders, and again, the units at that point in time will be removed from the battlefield. And the reason why we've got the two methods is to allow different types of play with different armies. So particularly armies that maybe have lots of skirmishing units or even cavalry units up against, say, a Roman legion. So you're doing Parthians against the Romans in Carhae as an example, even though we don't have the Parthians as yet. You want another way that Roman legion can be defeated, because a lot of armies will find it very difficult to defeat them in hand-to-hand combat. So you want to be able to use the cavalry or your skirmishing units to maybe fight a more attritional battle by using missile weapons and stripping a unit's animus down rather than actually killing lots of people. And it gives that type of a person commanding that type of an army the ability to take on the more professional drilled armies and actually find another way of beating them that doesn't mean I have to have lots of units which I know I'm going to get slaughtered in hand-to-hand combat. Or I can prepare the ground. I can go in and use my skirmishers to actually reduce a cohort's animus level, and then I'll send my war bands in because they've got a better chance now of winning.
Okay. So, during a game, and again, I don't want to get too much into the mechanics at the moment, do you find that the frontage of a unit is reduced, or is it a case of you're losing units from the back, but the frontage always remains the same?
In the majority of cases, the bases will be removed from the back of a unit. there are certain units in certain armies where they will have a special rule that actually says for this unit you've actually got to remove the base from the front. Sort of an example is because we're dealing with units is how we're going to probably play with a Roman cohort for the Punic Wars. So we know that's formed of Hastarte, Principe, and Triarii. Now, traditionally, a lot of rules treat those as separate units.
Yeah.
We're treating the Manipular cohort as one unit, and it will have a base for each of those troop types.
Oh, okay.
Now, in essence, the first two, the Hastarte and Principe, in broad terms, and it is in broad terms, are quite similar in how they're armed and how they fight. The very different unit is probably more the Triarii at the back, because these are your veteran units. So how we would probably deal with those is that if a Manipular cohort loses a close combat against an opposing unit, we're going to have a special rule for those that says the player in command has the option to move the Triarii to the front of the unit. So the veterans move forward to hold the line, to seal the gap, and they will fight, and that will have an effect on the unit. It will maybe raise the unit's animus to veteran status. It will give an additional close combat bonus. However, if subsequently that unit then loses a base in close combat, you lose the Triarii, because they now go, and there is a chance is that the remaining two bases, because they've just watched the veterans be cut down in front of them, actually may then break and flee.
That's quite a nice concept. I like the idea of using different types of miniatures in one unit, because you don't see that very often.
No, you don't at all, do you?
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things. we're trying to do. We are dealing very much with units. So you'll see through the army list we've done that a Roman cohort is about 4 bases, because that there isn't an exact sort of figure to man ratio, but it sort of fits that. That's what a cohort looks like. So it's around the 480. A warband tends to be bigger. So that's about 9 bases up to, I think our largest unit is a Macedonian phalangite, which has 12 bases within it, and looks quite impressive when they're all put together, because you've got 48 figures in the unit.
Yeah, that would look good. Yeah. And of course, Andy's rubbed his hands going, that's 2 packs of figures.
Yes, yeah. When we released the army list, I think there were a few people said, hold on a minute, a warband is at 27 figures. That's unfortunately larger than the pack size. But I think, Andy will correct me if I'm wrong, is actually a lot of the packs that actually go out actually tend to have more than 24 figures.
A few more figures in, yeah.
Yeah. But when you actually look at a warband type army, you're going to be buying multiple packs of the units actually. So actually it's fairly easy to create units anyway.
Yeah.
So Mike, have you got enough Macedonians?
I haven't bought any Macedonians. I've got early Greeks, early Persians, and I've just bought some Scythians.
Oh, okay.
But I have enough so far.
Well, that's it. The early Persians are actually quite interesting, because Sparabara and how that's going to be. Now, in researching it, and I think one of the exciting, interesting, frustrating things about developing the army list, but ultimately developing the unit cards, and I think we can talk about more about those probably later on, because they're quite a key component of what we're putting together for the War and Empire rules, is, well, how do you deal with Sparabara? There is a sort of one school of thought that says there are units that were equipped with them all the time. There's another school of thought that says, well, actually, Sparabara shields, you weren't equipped with them all the time. They actually sat in the baggage train, and depending on the battlefield situation, they were brought forward and actually get allocated to the unit for the battle and deployed at the front. And then that's how they were used. My thinking at the moment for the unit card for Median Persian infantry is that the Sparabara it won't be such a Sparabara infantry, or unit, it will actually be, they'll have a special rule that says you can use Sparabara and you'll deploy a base of Sparabara equipped troops in front of your standard unit to show they've got some extra defensive factors, that sort of thing. But actually they don't count towards combat, and you don't necessarily lose them as a base as part of the unit's strength.
Yeah, again, that's a nice idea, because I mean, I've been basing all mine up for another set of rules.
Mm-hmm.
And everything is based on 80 by 40s.
That wouldn't be sword and spear by any chance, would it?
Funnily enough. Yeah. And it's been great because I could buy a pack of figures and basically gives me 2 bases. So I've done, the Sparabara, but I've also done some sort of standard infantry just to sort of say, these are Sparabara without the big shields.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's ways on up. So, but the way you're doing it by having the smaller bases making up an overall unit, it gives you the flexibility to basically drop bases in there, which is, a really nice idea.
But I think it's one of the things I've been finding the more and more I've been researching this is that a lot of what you thought or a lot of what people think, you can find a different argument for how troops were used, and I think that's quite nice for us developing the rules at the moment, because maybe it gives us it gives Andy and I, and gives myself the opportunity to maybe put a slightly different spin on units and come up with some imaginative uses and rules that we can put to units that can make them interesting when you deploy them on the battlefield.
And as you just said there, or you just implied, the units are fairly flexible in the size of them. So, a small cohort is 4 bases, where a big Macedonian phalanx is, it was 12, wasn't it?
It's 12 bases, yes, yeah. And with what we kind of find with a lot of warband type armies, that sort of thing, even with some of the Persian units as well, is that we will come up with, again, because there are sort of different schools of thoughts, is that a Persian infantry unit, early Achaemenid, will be 8 bases. But in the army list, a player has the option, if he wants to, because he may have the figures and he may have the bases, to maybe expand that up to 10 bases or potentially up to 12 bases.
Cool. Shall we have a chat about what you mentioned earlier, which was unit cards?
Well, yeah. If you're all right, what I'll do is I'll take you back sort of one step.
Okay.
Because, as you said, you've seen the beta of the rules over the weekend. And I thought what was quite interesting, I was actually, while I was working over it, I was listening to your interview with Simon Miller when you were talking about his To the Strongest rules.
Oh, right, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And I was actually chortling because you were talking to Simon about how the rules have been developed. And I think Simon said that To the Strongest initially started out as, I think it was 1 or 2 sides of A4 and then turned into a 40,000 word multi-page document.
Yes.
And I have to say, at the time, it made me laugh because I was sat here in front of what is probably now virtually the beta version of the War and Empire rules, which is now currently standing at a 55-page document at about 30,000 words, and that started out on about 4 pages of A4. With quite spread text. But I think that what I think becomes quite interesting about war game rules, and I don't know how you find this, is that I'm thinking for myself in writing these, actually as a rules writer, and hopefully if I get this right, and people enjoy what we're putting together, is all this work and this document, and probably Simon finds the same thing, is you'll know you've got it right when they actually never look at it again, because they'll play the game off the QRF document, because they've got all the mechanisms sat in the head, or they've got the other aids in our case it'll be unit cards, and actually that document that I've lovingly crafted, sweated over, terrified about, is somebody will read it a couple of times, and if I've got it right and explained it clearly enough, they'll hopefully never refer to it again that often.
That is exactly what you want. And any set of rules should be able to be played off of, a 1-page QRF with a couple of tables maybe. Mm-hmm. In fact, the best rules are the ones where you don't even need that. The rules are there just to clarify that odd time, isn't it? So
yeah, they are. Yeah, and you don't want to keep going back to it to clarify, because if a player's having to do that, then I've explained it wrong, and that means it's not easy to sit in the player's mind and for them to recall it easily and say, right, in this situation, this is what I know happens, and this is what I've got to do.
Yeah, it's this thing about it's something that which Clark talks about that engagement with the rules, isn't it?
Yes.
It's how much a game becomes whether you're concentrating on playing the game and the tactical decisions that are presented in front of you, as opposed to having to engage with the rules to find out, I want to do this. How on earth do I do it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think very much so. I think that's the aim. That's what you're trying to achieve as a rules writer.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, this will be when it goes out, it'll be the first set that'll have been aired to such a wide public. I've been writing rules for years, more for my own use with my wargaming buddy who comes around and beats me, or I beat him every other week. And this is something that is very, very different. And to be honest, if I'm very honest, probably quite terrifying at times.
Yeah. All right, then, Andy, you've got half an hour. Talk to us about the rules, then.
So the rules really will be presented as a skeleton. They will be the core mechanisms that a War and Empire game will be run from.
Okay.
So that'll be the first part. The flesh of a War and Empire game will actually come from the unit cards. And we'll talk about those a bit later on, because they're the things that will make the armies unique. Those are the special rules that apply to those, to units in that certain army, and what those units can do during a game. So, the structure of the rules, or the structure of a game turn, is, it starts with the command phase. And in the command phase, is when we use a command deck, which is at the moment is a card deck where players draw a card for each general or commander in their army.
Right.
They can then review that card, and on that card there will be a value. And dependent on the game size, that value will change. That value is the number of orders that general or commander will be able to issue in the order phase to his army.
Okay.
There is a risk. There will be a blank card, because, occasionally we do want that, again, that coming back to that unpredictability, that a player comes back to is that I've got 2 generals, I've drawn 2 cards, I can issue 3 orders, the other one's got a blank. That means that general can't issue any orders, so that means my plan for this turn has gone to the wall, and I'm going to have to wait a turn. Once the players have done that, they look at the cards and they decide which of those generals they're going to allocate those cards to. It's not done blind. There is, the generals the player's allowed to apply a bit of intelligence behind how he wants to use his command cards. Both players then reveal their cards, and then the general with the highest value is the general who moves first.
Right.
Once he's issued all his orders, it then goes to the general with the next highest value. Now, that could be the same player. It could be the player on the other side of the table. And that's what controls the sequence of how units will then be moved in the order phase.
Right. Okay, now, the generals in your army, is your army constructed in such a way that a general can only control... He essentially has his own wing of the army that he controls, and those are the only troops that he can order?
We started out that way, but I think what we actually did, we moved away from that because it became a little bit too restrictive. So, in essence, the generals and the orders is just a generating of a shall we say, a resource in terms of orders that you can use anywhere across your army. The difference being is if you attempt to order units within the command radius of a general or commander, invariably what you'll find is that the unit will automatically follow those orders. Mm-hmm. If you're outside of the command radius, you can still issue the order to a unit, but they will now have to take an animus test to see if they'll actually obey it. So again, there's another level of unpredictability comes in, because I can issue an order because I want this, a skirmishing cavalry unit to advance to the top of a hill. I throw I run the animus test and fail it, and they don't respond to the order and they don't move, and I've lost my order.
Right.
So how do you actually assign orders? would it be a case you turn over your card and say, right, I got 3 orders, so therefore I just take 3 chits and put them next to 3 units?
It's probably more simple than that. You turn it over, you see you've got 3 orders, and as the player say, right, I want to move that Roman cohort, a double move, and that's the first order I'm going to issue. You then carry out that order with that unit and they do it. You then go back to your next order and say, right, and I want to order this unit to do that order. And they go off and do that. So you don't actually put chits down. The player just in essence verbalizes his order by saying, I'm going to move this.
Think of it more as an event than an actual order. Your order just instigates an event.
Got it now.
Yeah.
That's nice.
Yeah. What we've done, and you may have picked it up, is the problem being, particularly with the larger games, is unless you then have an order card that you can issue 25 orders or something like that, it becomes a little bit unmanageable. So I always quite liked the idea of being able to, we call them vexellations, because I wanted to use some Latin-based terminology, sad as I am. But it's the idea of being able to brigade units together of the same type. So you can brigade as you deploy your army, you can brigade 4 Gallic war bands together, a maximum of 4 Gallic war bands, and you can attach to that brigade 2 skirmish order units, be it, Gallic javelin men or Gallic archers. So you can then move those 6 units under one order, as long as they all stay together as a brigade.
Right.
And you can only create vexellations for the deployment of your army, and the idea being is that as the army sets out, it can move in sort of brigades and it will advance. But as it begins to get closer and closer to the enemy, those brigades will begin to break apart as units are sent to do, hold a piece of terrain here, charge an enemy there, screen and advance there, or somebody's now falling back because they've come under fire. So you'll find that the brigade you create at the beginning of a game will begin to dissolve as the game moves into its sort of key phases as units get closer into combat or units begin to fall back as they're being affected by battlefield events.
Mm-hmm. Can you activate units more than once?
No, you can activate a unit once. So while the active general's doing all of that, the inactive general, sat on the other side of the table, he is allowed to react. So there will be certain conditions where if a unit moves within missile fire range of a unit, the non-active general could say, actually, my unit is going to fire at that unit and try and stop their movement by inflicting wounds, disrupting formation, that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. But that's a decision he has to make because it fits into, he says he's going to react. He then has to take a test to make sure he can react. If he passes the test, he can react. Fails the test, the unit obviously doesn't react, but now the unit becomes unavailable to him when he becomes the active general.
Because it's essentially been activated already.
Yes. So it's in essence, and this is what it's like. As Andy said, it's about an event. It's an event he can trigger based on what the enemy, on what his opponent's actually doing. And so it'll be things like a missile unit will be able to fire. A unit would be able potentially to withdraw, but also a bit like an opportunity charge, where somebody's crossed a unit's facing, and because they've done that, is that unit, the commander of that unit, be it the war chief or whatever, said, actually, no, there's an opportunity here. I'm going to surge forward and try and catch this unit before it disappears. And the player can make that decision. He has the opportunity to make that decision, so he can either react or he can actually say, no, I'll wait for my own turn and I'll activate then.
So during these orders and these activations, are you doing combat or is it?
No, the orders phase is just is movement, is all the movement of the units in the armies.
So it's only the opposing player who can basically initiate a combat situation during that orders phase by reacting to.
Yeah, I think he can do. The only sort of combat action that actually takes place in the orders phase is actually a ranged attack. So that's the only one where you'll actually follow that one through. The missile unit will fire at the target unit, and it will inflict potentially casualties, whatever, on that unit. If a unit undertakes an opportunity charge, it will stop obviously the unit of the unit it's charged into, but the combat will actually still be fought in the close combat phase.
Okay, that's good. And do you have different movement rates?
Yes, yeah. I mean, again, it depends. Close order infantry, loose order infantry, and skirmish order infantry all move at different rates. The same again for close order, loose order, and skirmish order cavalry. We also have close order and loose order chariots and elephants, and they move at that. At the moment, any field artillery, unless it's covered on the special rule for the unit, is basically a fixed unit. Once it's deployed, it can't move. It can pivot to fire, but it won't be able to move elsewhere on the battlefield. But that will change with the success of the Kickstarter, because we'll have the Caraballistae mounted in the carts.
Yeah. And do they just have the one type of movement? So, say, for example, standard infantry, close order, they have one movement distance that they can do, or is there a way of doing like a double movement?
Yeah, there is. Each unit has a normal move, it has a double move, and it has a charge move. In most circumstances, particularly around with the infantry units, the charge move and the double move is invariably the same distance. Mm-hmm. For cavalry units, the charge move is slightly further than a double move. And that's to represent that cavalry units will build momentum as they go towards an opposing unit. So they'll start in the walk, then they'll move to a trot, and then they'll move to the canter, and then probably for the last element of the charge, they'll move into the gallop so they get the greatest amount of shock effect as they hit the unit.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And double moves, is a double move there for when you're essentially out of sort of charge range from an enemy? So, when you're in the rear, you can do a double move to get to where you need it. But once you get close to the enemy, you then go back to a normal move. Yeah,
so it's that sort of usual restriction for double moves is you can't initiate one within 8 inches of an enemy unit, and you can't finish one within 8 inches of an enemy unit. As long as you don't do either of those things, you can double move around the battlefield. So it would be for the rapid movement of units from your rear to your front, pushing units maybe from the centre out to a flank, that sort of thing.
Mm.
And that's one of the other things I thought I'd just do is that I was also keen to extend the battlefield out from the table. So we allow, we've built in the use of reserves and flank marches. So players have the opportunity to deploy troops off table, and then can hold them off there and then bring them on when they need to bring them on. And then dependent on certain situations is, we have a rule for like a scouting method of deployment. And if you out-scout your opponent, you are allowed to flank march with some of your army. And you can send them round to arrive at some time as dictated by the player in the opponent's half of the table.
Mm. Okay, so we've got a nice fluid orders phase, which I do like and ticks a lot of boxes for me.
Yeah. I think what I've tried to, it's slightly chaotic. So it doesn't have a defined charge period, or a charge element. Is basically, it is, in essence, it's at its simplest, it's 3 steps. Step number 1, issue orders. So the active general issues orders to the troops under his command. Although in the rules it's called step number 2. Step number 2 is like in brackets, is the non-active general can react to those orders that were issued. And then the third step of the orders phase is, at the end of all of that, is you can now move your generals around behind your troops.
Cool.
And I think the other thing just to quickly note about generals is, again, you don't pay for generals, but you won't find them in an army list. So you don't pay 100 points, you don't pay 50 points. And our logic behind that is that every army, no matter how big it was, always had a commander. So you always get a general. Dependent on the size of game that you're playing, then you may get commanders who will support that general to command other elements of the army.
Oh, okay. So how do you handle armies that maybe weren't so well disciplined and probably had less commanders.
Yeah. I mean, traditionally, one of the classic matchups between, let's say, Romans and Gauls, for example, what a lot of rules do is they give the Romans more commanders, so they are automatically more flexible because more orders can be issued.
Yeah. At the moment, we are not doing anything like that. For this, the release of the beta and the first sets of unit cards, we're keeping it sort of, keeping it simple.
The Romans are more flexible in ours because they have more units. The units. What's the best way of putting it? They have smaller units, which makes them more flexible to move around and take advantage of gaps and things like that. It's actually a slight disadvantage to have a big, massive unit.
Yeah, so I think one of the things we're looking to do is one of the developments we have as slightly further down the road is that we want to do more with the individual armies. So we're thinking around things about character cards. So at the moment, these are generic generals, but we want to be able to do something that says you can have Julius Caesar on the table if you want to. And Julius Caesar will come with a card that says these are the rules that Julius Caesar brings to the battle. We want to also do the similar sort of thing with the armies themselves, but we've not developed this enough. And it is things like if you're using a Roman army, you can have a general, but for every for these bands, you can actually now have not one commander but two commanders. So you can increase the number of commanders that army can have. Also, as part of that, sort of make the armies a little bit more unique is we may have something around things that, if you take like an ancient British army or something under Cassivellaunus, used a lot of ambush tactics. Mm-hmm. So that ancient British army will be able to deploy maybe more units in ambush than another army would be able to. It may be able to, when we were thinking about this, is that it may be able to even manipulate the terrain on the tabletop to make it more advantageous. So if it's again the ancient British army, you may want to put more woods on the table. So you deploy the sort of the standard terrain on the table, and he can add another 2 or 3 terrain features because he can hide his unit. It gives him a better ability to hide his units and use his special rules. But that's something we're not going to do now. It's something we've got sort of coming in sort of the next tranche of work, is the sort of idea of character cards and tactics cards and that sort of thing that add greater character to each of the armies under War and Empire.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, the first job really is to get the core mechanics really strong. And then, as you say, you can just fiddle around the edge and add a little bit of sort of gloss and sparkle. But all of that then gives a bit more character to each of the armies.
Yeah, I mean, there's quite a lot of character in actually the unit cards, because as I said, it's the unit cards that add the flesh to the bones of the rules. So, but it will change dependent on which army you're using. So, at the moment, the first 2 sets of cards that we have in development is the Gallic army. So with its war bands and its chariots and the cavalry and the skirmish order troops. So you'll see on those types of units things like, because they're a warband special rule, which means that, it's the classic, it has to follow up on pursuits, it has to follow up on pushbacks, but it also has something about, a warband's effectiveness is when it first goes into combat. A warband tries to break its opponent in the first round of combat. So it will have something where it will gain the ability to roll an additional dice to enhance its combat score. It will have the ability to carry out what we call the barbarian charge. So warbands are traditionally loose order units, which means they can charge about 12 inches, but actually once per game the unit can declare a barbarian charge. The unit rolls a d6 and he adds that to the 12 inches, so now he can advance anything from 30, he can charge anything from 13 inches up to 18 inches. And it adds that sort of flavour. With the Romans, we're dealing with the Caesarian Romans, so again, we've got special rules on there. We have a cohort special rule, which allows the Roman player to exchange his cohorts. So a cohort may be engaged in combat, but he can, if he's got another fresher cohort behind, he can actually carry out an exchange and bring the fresher one forward and move the sort of the tired, fatigued unit backwards. The usual sort of testudo. At the moment, what I've just done is sort of how to deal with the pilum.
Yeah.
The pilum is very much about disrupting a unit, be it when the cohort's attacked or when it attacks. So, I'm sort of building in the rule that says when a cohort unit charges, before you actually do the actual work out who actually won, lost the combat, the cohort, if it has pilums, because we have limited the number of pilums, it can only do it, say, twice in a game because they didn't carry lots of them. It can disrupt the unit or add a disruption token to unit to give it an advantage in combat. And I think then for the first legion, the first cohort of the legion, we have what we call the honor of the legion rule because they've got the eagle. So it looks a little bit like a stubborn rule, is that these guys won't give ground, but when they do give ground, then it can have repercussions then from the other cohorts that are near them because they may start retreating as well because you've just lost the eagle. And that's not going to go down very well.
So we talked a lot about, where we are so far with the command phase and the order phase. So, we started to talk about different phases of the game, but we actually haven't talked about the turn sequence, have we? And what a turn looks like. I mean, we talked a bit about command cards and how that works and how activation works, but we haven't kind of gone back. We haven't put a structure around that, have we? So before we go into the combat phase and what happens next, can we just take one step back and talk about the whole turn sequence and what a turn looks like?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. We jumped in there quite nicely, and I got very enthusiastic.
It was all Mike's fault, so just blame Mike.
So a game turn in War and Empire, as sort of alluded to, comprises of a number of phases. So it starts with the command phase, where the command cards are drawn and allocated to the generals and commanders in each of the armies. The values on those cards will then determine which general moves first and so forth in the following phase, which is the order phase.
Okay, can I just clarify something on the command phase? Because when we talked about the drawing of the cards, and you draw alternate cards, do you actually get to a point where you draw the number of cards into your hand? So you end up with a hand. So if you've got 3 generals, you end up with a hand of three command cards before you can decide where they go? Or is it a case of you draw a card, you look at the card, you have to decide which general to play it on before you know what your next card is?
It's actually the first one. So what the player does is they draw the number of cards alternately. So they end up with a hand that is equal to the number of general commanders. Okay. They can then look at those cards, and then they can decide how they then will be allocated to the generals and commanders in their army. They're placed face down next to the corresponding figure on the table. Once both players have done that, they turn them all over, reveal them, and then they work out then what the sequence that will then be followed between each of the generals, commanders in the orders phase.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you for that. Okay, great.
Okay, so. Mm-hmm. We've talked a little bit about the orders phase and what goes on there. I think just very quickly, I think the one thing we didn't cover in the orders phase is there aren't a lot of maneuvers that units do. We've taken quite a simplistic approach, is that on the battlefield, even though a drilled army is capable of all sorts of fancy maneuvers, in the heat of battle, on uneven terrain, they don't do lots of parade ground maneuvers. So it is very much about things about you move forward, you can wheel, you can do like what we call the oblique advance, where you can sort of advance and shift off to one side, and then you can expand and contract the size of your formation, and then drilled troops then get the ability to do probably the one fancy maneuver, which is do like an about turn, which war bands and that sort of thing can't do. So after the order phase is complete, the generals have moved their units. The non-active generals reacted with these units. Any reaction shooting has taken place and has been finalized. We actually then move into the shooting phase. And the shooting phase is, in essence, is simultaneous. Both players, and you'll decide who goes first, get to fire all their units that are capable of doing so. So conduct a ranged attack. There is an effective range and a long range for each weapon type in the game. You carry out the attack. Once both sides have carried out all their ranged attacks, then you apply the outcome. So if people lose bases, if they lose animus, if they are disrupted, that's done and applied after all the shooting has been completed. Because the idea being is, well, it's all taking place at the same time. So that's why we do the application of the results of any of those attacks at the end of the phase.
Okay.
Then you move into close combat, and ultimately is that the close combats will be units that have charged in the current turn. It will be units who are still fighting from the turn before. I think the only thing we really said there is the player whose general activated first in the order phase will decide the order in which the close combats will be fought. And everybody fights. So every close combat is fought. And you move through all those things, and they are fought to the results stage. So you start the fight, you work out whether anybody who won, who lost, who broke, who stood, who followed up. Once you completed that combat, you then move on to the next combat, and you do the same thing that until they're all completed.
Well, okay, and again, is combat simultaneous?
Both sides fight, yes. So
So what I mean is that in some ancient rules, you have an attacker who attacks, and then the defender defends with what's with what's left, as opposed to other rules where both sides fight. So both sides start at a particular strength. That is the strength they fight at, and then the result is applied once both sides have fought.
I think it's probably a little bit more like the latter. So 2 units come into combat. Yeah. They roll the unit's combat dice, which is based on a polyhedral system. So we can differentiate between, veteran troops, drilled troops, warriors, and levy. So the better you are, in theory, the bigger the dice. So you're using D10s, D8s, D6s. You roll that gives you a starting factor. You then add on a modifier for the unit you're fighting. So if you say a close order unit fighting a loose order unit, infantry unit, you may get +2. That goes onto the value of the dice. You apply any special rules if they do that. And in essence, what you do is you come up with a score for each of the combatants. You compare those 2 scores. The person with the highest score is the person who wins. So, and then what you then do is one of the unique tools we think we've introduced is what we call the combat's results dice. So you refer to a table, and dependent on the difference in the scores between the 2 units, you throw your combat results dice. One of them controls whether a unit is pushed back. One of them controls whether a unit loses any animus, and one of them will control whether a unit loses any bases. And if the
okay, so just to clarify, in the start of the rules where it says D6, for example, you will need. We recommend 3 different colours of D6.
Yeah.
Is this white?
Yes. Yeah.
Right.
So the idea being, and it's actually on the table, is that it's like a red, white, and blue. Right. So players hopefully will become familiar with the red one as a combat result dice in close combat phase deals with a pushback result. The white dice is to do with animus loss, and the blue dice is to do with losing bases. I would have liked to have done that the other way around, because red and base loss feels like blood, but it seemed odd to say blue, white, red rather than red, white, blue. So that's why it feels as though it's the wrong way around. So it's that thing where we were discussing before about probability as against being actually able to predict the result. So what the probable result should be, as in, as an example, a Roman cohort in theory probably can beat a Gallic warband because it's heavy infantry against loose order infantry, it's drilled, it's armoured, it's all those sort of things that come into it. And it may win on a score, it may get to roll the dice, but it could have a bad die roll and throw 3 ones. It could have a brilliant die roll and push the unit back, take an animus off the unit, and take a base off the unit. And one of the things I quite liked, and again, trying to make these rules at times quite bloody, is using the idea of exploding 6s. So if you roll a 6 on any of those dice, you get to roll that dice again to see if you can achieve another success. So if you're very good at rolling 6s, which I'm not, and I proved that in some of the test games with people, is a combat can be a very bloody episode where bases are dropping left, right, and centre. A unit's animus is falling very quickly, and it's getting multiple pushbacks. And if it gets pushed back too many times, it will actually then potentially turn into a flee move.
Right.
That's a very interesting concept, and it puts an awful lot of intelligence and variation into what you're doing, because, you know, most rules, you will have a single dice to give you an effect, you know, like cause a wound or something. But the fact that you've split it into the 3 components, I kind of like that.
Yeah.
It is unusual, yeah, because normally, there is some form of combined result in most combats, isn't there? In most game systems we see already, you will lose a certain number of men. That in turn means that you could have to take a morale test. That in turn could mean, whether or not you get pushed back or not. So having them separately is interesting. As you say, it could be a case of you don't actually lose any casualties, but you end up getting pushed back in combat.
Yeah.
And stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that works out really, that's really interesting.
It's because in some ways, again, it's part of the thought you're dealing with units. So it doesn't necessarily mean you're not losing any casualties. You are sort of losing casualties. I mean, an Animus does the same sort of thing when that goes down, but it's like you're not losing enough to take a base off.
Yes.
But because you're not dealing, say, as you would do with Warhammer Ancients or Clash of Empires, where you've got your big 20-figure unit, and you can see a sort of a unit deteriorate because you're taking the figures off it. In War and Empire, potentially your unit can stay quite whole. It can start a battle with 4 bases, and you can get halfway through the battle, and it could still have 4 bases. But actually, its animus could have been falling. So it potentially, even though it doesn't necessarily lose enough troops to lose a base, the animus drops so far as actually the unit can't continue the fight anyway, because the will of that unit is no longer not strong enough to keep it going. So one of the things that a player will have to do using his orders is actually learn to look after that. So occasionally he will have to issue orders to raise units' animus to keep them in the fight, because if he doesn't, he may find more and more of his units going backwards. We use a similar approach with shooting, and the view we've taken very much with shooting. I mean, unlike the gunpowder age, missile fire was more of an annoyance rather than something that would sort of wiped units out. And so again, we use the 3 dice approach with that, and that's even in a strange way more simplistic. Is you decide a unit is within effective or a long range, depending on which of those 2 ranges it is, and whether you're an artillery unit or a non-artillery unit. You throw your 3 dice, and it's just basically a 3 dice. And in the main, you're looking. If you're at effective range, you're probably looking to sort of score on those dice maybe 4+, 5+. And again, what they will do is they won't push back a unit, but what they will do is disrupt a unit. So they'll add a disruption token marker to the unit. So therefore it represents the, as the arrows come down or the pilums drop or the stone comes out of the sky, is that the unit is maybe separating, shields are going up, men are doing slightly different things. So it represents a certain amount of disorganization that's been inflicted on the unit. But again, also the animus may go down because soldiers under fire get a bit perturbed. They don't want to be continuing the fire, so missile fire can reduce the unit's animus. It can take bases away, but that's shall we say, the least probability. Again, you can do that. Non-artillery units at long range can't remove bases. They can only, in essence, annoy a unit because the distance is too far, your accuracy is gone, the strength of the shot diminishes over distance. So it's more effective at effective range. But artillery, because it can shoot further, because it basically throwing potentially big bricks or very big darts, it does have the opportunity of inflicting a base loss at long range. But again, it's the 3 dice combat result dice, as we call them. You throw those, you know the colours, you read the score, and you know whether it's been disrupted, whether it's lost an animus, whether it's lost a base, or actually all 3 of those things have happened to it. So something could always be happening to a unit as the result of a ranged attack or as the result of a close combat.
Do you have anything in there about morale? So morale of the army or just morale of the units? I'm kind of guessing that animus will be used to sort of track a sort of unit's morale and whether a unit is going to stand.
Yeah.
But what about overall in the army?
Yeah. So animus, as you say, it ultimately is probably like a unit morale. So it is, as we said, it's a living thing during the game. It starts at a point, and as the unit is impacted by battlefield events, that animus will potentially drop. But generals have the ability to pick it back up again. When it reaches 0, the unit decides it's going to quit the battle. As far as the army is concerned, what we've done within the end phase is we've put in some sort of simplistic victory conditions along the lines of that if you reach the end phase and an army has over, I think it was, if I remember rightly, it's about 2/3 either lost, as in removed from the battlefield, fleeing, then that army loses because there isn't enough there for them to fight. The will's gone and they'll retreat off the battlefield. So it's an army morale is actually done off. It's checked in the end phase of each turn, and it equates to a point at which has it lost too many units? Has it got too many units that are now combat ineffective? And when it reaches that point, then that's when that army will withdraw from the battlefield. And the other way you can potentially to win the game is if there's no command structure. So if an army has lost all its generals and commanders, there's nobody to lead the army anymore. You can't issue any more orders, and therefore the person who has got generals and commanders around wins.
Sounds perfectly reasonable to me.
Yeah, I mean, what we do again with the generals is the only way you can lose them is through ranged attack and through close combat, and they have to be attached to a unit. You can't, in essence, be gamey and target them. So there is they will attach themselves to, if they attach themselves to a unit that comes under ranged attack, then obviously if the unit's hit by arrows, and it loses a base, it's a potential that the general, had his Harold moment and got the arrow in the eye in close combat. Again, if it's attached to the unit actually doesn't have to lose a base. The risk is considerably greater in close combat. That's done on a die roll. And if he scores a 1 or a 2, then he's cut down and lost. And then all sorts of horrible things happen to the unit that he's with and the people around him because they may not like that and all start fleeing backwards.
Does the general always have to be associated with the unit, or can he be on his own?
No, a general can be on his own, and while he's on his own, in essence, he's immune from dying because he's controlling the army. He's not a priority target. Units look after units. They want to kill the big firm body of men. They're not necessarily worried about the guy on the white horse and the big red cape. They only worry about him when they're actually getting close enough to actually do something to him, and that's maybe when if it's like Julius Caesar stepping in with the 8th Legion and he steps into the line with them. At that point in time, the warriors will recognize him and try to cut him down. There's a chance that can happen. So generals don't have to attach themselves to unit. They can wander around a battlefield quite freely. But when they do start attaching themselves to unit, they lay themselves open to being killed.
I think we've covered most of the sort of basics of what's in the rules. Yeah. I think the key sort of selling point to me is this mechanic you've got for working out damage results, which I think is actually fairly inspired. Now, because you're doing a set of rules which is covering a huge period of time, as, a lot of ancient rules do. You obviously, we've talked about infantry, we talked about cavalry. Have you got rules in there for the other sort of major things you saw on the battlefield, like, chariots, elephants, artillery as well? I suppose you have mentioned that briefly.
Yes, yeah. We do cover chariots. The rules have a section on chariots, dealing with. We're treating chariots, sort of the heavier type chariots, as close order chariots. The sort of the Gallic ancient British type chariot light as a loose order chariot, but then we cover scythe chariots as well. So there are rules for those. There's a section on how you deal with chariots and how you issue orders, how you deal with them in ranged combat, how you deal with them in close combat. And we have the same thing again for elephants. We treat elephant in the rules as a close order unit. And as with most rules, to be honest, and I think that's the sort of thing with particularly with an ancient rule, it's trying to find something unique you can bring to the marketplace in some ways. Elephants do what they do. They inspire fear. People don't like fighting them, but they can potentially be a battle winner. Conversely, they can potentially be a battle loser because they rampage. If they have an adverse result, they decide they don't like that and they'll take off in a direction and crush anybody who gets in their way.
I don't know why people use them. I really don't.
I think it's fun factor. I think it's either sort of like trying to inflict pain on yourself. It's just the sheer fun factor of or boasting in the pub afterwards that actually I got them to work.
Yeah.
And actually do what they were supposed to do. So yeah, we do that. The sort of section, other things that we do allow. We talked earlier about you get generals for free and commanders for free. You don't have to pay points. The number of generals, commanders you have is dictated by the size of your army. And we have to sort of have a table that does that. The other thing we did is you also get each army, and again, it can be managed by the size of it, gets 2, what we call elite tokens. And basically what it is that when we sat down and talked about it, is an army always has units that are considered better than everybody else. Now that could be in a warband type army because it's the tribe, the clan of the general of the army. It's his clan. If it's a Roman legion, it could be the first cohort. If it's Spartans, it's the Hippias, the 300, that sort of thing. So what we allow players to do is to identify 2 of their units as elite. And that's free. They don't pay for anything to do that because you'll always have somebody like that on the table. And basically you identify them. Now, one way of doing it is you put a token behind them or you just know that it is. 2 things then happen with that unit in a game. One, they get some permanent modifiers in things like combat. They get bonuses. They get bonuses for passing animus tests and that sort of thing because they're a cut above. They also have the ability to trade in the token to throw 2 dice in combat and then choose the highest score, or to reset their animus back to its starting level, or to basically avoid an animus test, or to automatically pass an order if they're out of the command range of a general. And again, it's coming back to that fact we just wanted, this is a game set in the classical period, and we just wanted to introduce that into that. It just gives something slightly different to a War and Empire game, and it gives somebody, again, remember we were talking about Hollywood moments, the ability to have, again, their much beloved unit that they've lovingly painted and say, that's the one I'm always designating as being elite in my army, because it can do all these things different in the game, which I can talk about ad infinitum with my friends every time we meet and fight again.
You did mention artillery earlier, and artillery was used a bit on the battle. I think the Romans used it quite a bit, didn't they?
Yes, yes.
Mostly it was used in sort of siege warfare.
Yes.
Are you thinking of, because obviously Westwind, Forge in Battle isn't for One Empire.
Yeah.
So
I do the same thing and get told off quite repeatedly by both Andy and Wendy for doing that.
Yeah. So obviously Forged in Battle do some lovely, lovely buildings. And, emplacement and camps and things. are you thinking, maybe not in this iteration of the rules, but maybe in the future one, of doing something around sieges?
Yes, that is a future iteration. So at the moment, again, we do recognise that you can use sort of like simplistic field works in a War and Empire battle moment, but that's more about being a sort of a linear obstacle that somebody hides behind rather than something you're trying to breach a wall or run ladders up to it, that sort of thing, so you can advance over the top. So artillery will be present in War and Empire battles under these rules. There won't be much of it. Romans probably do get the most because of the allocation of Scorpios to the cohorts. It's fixed. So once you've deployed it, 99 times out of 100, for most of the armies, the artillery won't actually move again. So you're going to have to make sure you put it in the right place, because once you've done that, that's where it will be. You won't, apart from pivoting, you won't be able to move it forward. So eventually your troops will advance ahead of it, and therefore it'll lose its ability to target people. But it is one of the things that we've been looking at, one of the future two of the future iterations for the War and Empire. One is a campaign type system. And the second one is to look at the siege siege warfare, because you say there's a beautiful range of buildings and artillery pieces and fortifications and ramps and all those sort of things that we need to try and make use of.
Yeah, exactly. And it means you can do things like Vercingetorix at Alicia, wasn't it?
Yes.
Charging down from that emplacement.
Yes.
And Caesar's wall or double wall around there. Which is pretty much impossible to do in any kind of war game. So having some way of, having some sort of emplacement that you can attack against, and how you put that into a set of rules, I think it'd be really interesting.
I think that it's one of those ones, I've tried not to think about it too much because I think it could become quite scary. It's how you do that. And I think the challenge with any siege game is how do you make it interesting for the players, and how do you maybe make it relevant? So some of it can be sort of slightly scenario based. So you can say, right, for this game, we're going to set up a portion of the circumvallation around, Alicia. And then, it runs down the length of the table. You've got Gallic units on one side, Gallic units on the other side, and they're going to try and break over this thing to break it apart so they can meet up. The other way of maybe handling it is so how do you handle it as a standalone game, and then how do you integrate it into a campaign system as well? Because the beauty of a campaign system is, in theory, you're expanding time. So you can actually introduce phases like, the approach, the encirclement, and how that affects the unit up until you get to fight the battle on the table.
Yeah. I mean, I must admit, I did a few years ago sit down and actually try to work how to do a sort of siege game in the ancient period. And, I almost did like a pre-game. I almost did it like the actual siege itself was a game that was played before the war game. So it was almost a case of you basically model this whole siege and model what goes on in the siege. And at a certain point, something happens in that siege. And then you just basically, like a wall gets breached. But at that point, that, okay, the wall's breached. That the people inside are in a pretty bad way. That there's so many troops that have been cut off or whatever. And then you've got all those variables, and that then goes into your scenario for your battle.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And I think the sort of two types. So, you take Caesar in Gaul, and he's attacking Gergovia. That's a slightly more long, drawn-out siege. So you're dealing much more about the approach, the encirclement, the breach of the walls. But there are other Gallic settlements that he came up with that literally he arrived and, he was fairly quite renowned, a bit like Wellington at times, about sort of saying, actually, guys, we're not waiting, just quickly knock some ladders together, and we're going to just basically try and run up to the walls and form up in testudo, advance to the walls. I'll have the Scorpios and my Onagas firing over the top of you. You get to the walls, you raise the ladders, and up and over you go. I'm not actually going to break down the walls as such. It is literally, and so that's actually not a bad game to try to represent in a way. That's probably in some ways the simplest one. It's not a siege as such, it's an assault. It's the final phase of the siege. I think the siege is the more difficult one to make that interesting. So, you've got to find a way that, a bit like, I suppose that our thoughts on the campaign system, as, we all know is that all campaigns die because unless you've got somebody who's dedicated to running it, most players want something they can set up and run fairly quickly and they can pick up and keep going. So, we're trying to maybe build something like that. There's a mapless campaign system which potentially uses cards for territories and that sort of thing. But and you hold the cards and that's your map. There isn't a physical map and you just basically, you use all that to set up battles and everything. So it's how you build your sieges into that.
Again, I suppose you do break it down and you go, like, there were the big sieges which took months and months, to break through. But, and again, going back to Alicia, because that's a great example, it was a breakout from a siege. So, when they were attacking Caesar's Wall, that was literally going over some field emplacements.
Yeah.
So, maybe you could literally turn and say, okay, these are some rules for using field emplacements.
Yep.
Which can be bought as part of your army, set them out, and you basically, break the tide of the Gallic foe against that. So that's a sort of easier step into it, and maybe that could then be used as a stepping stone to a full blown sort of siege campaign stroke rule set.
Yeah, that could be quite an interesting one to do.
Yeah, but as you say, it's one of these things that an awful lot of the time, what you end up playing in a game isn't the siege itself. It's much more it's the assault phase. It's at the point where, or it's the assault phase of the assaulting force, or at the point where the assaulting force finds itself assailed itself, either by somebody inside trying to break the siege, or a third force arriving.
Yes.
Yeah.
The relief force arriving. So, and that tends to, those are the kind of contact points that you'll end up gaining a lot of the time, as opposed to the hours spent doing, mining and all the time that is spent just kind of sitting around waiting for the people inside to stop.
Yeah.
Well, that's it. I mean, essentially, that's it. I mean, the siege component is literally setting you up for the for the one game. It's almost like a scenario creator. So you can turn around and go, okay, so in this scenario, I've got some forces who are behind this wall who are pretty beaten up. The attacker is in the middle, and then suddenly I'm going to flank him with my relieving force.
Yeah. I mean, it depends. I don't know. It's one of those things. It's again, the settlement, the fort, the castle, whatever is. You can. It's whether you can play it a bit like a card game in a strange way. Is that you have that as a series of cards to say, right, well, there's the north face of my settlement, there's the south face, there's the east face, there's the west face. And then the attacking player has these tools. So he has if he has the right things in his army, he can bombard, he can have siege towers, he can mine, those sort of things. And maybe it's a bit like sort of, you play those against a sector. The defender has the things he can play against it. So, he may have a countermine card or something like that and feints, and you maybe sort of like play them, they sort of one rules the other one out. So if I attempt to mine but you counter mine, well, my mine's not successful, I didn't break into the wall, so therefore I can't launch an assault. But actually if I play assault towers against another wall and you can't counter that by throwing flaming pots of oil or whatever, then actually I've got my assault towers up against you. Well, right, now let's get that on the table, because that's the bit we're now going to play. Now I've got the assault in there. And you can maybe put, it's a bit like a game within a game in a strange way. But it's maybe something, I think it's maybe looking at something you potentially, if you're doing like within a campaign or even as part of the preparation for the next week's game, you could set up and do it very quickly for an hour or so in an evening, arrive at, this is where we are at the siege. Then we'll set it on the table and play it the following week. That's very quick off the head. sort of thought of actually doing it, but that's maybe sort of things. This is what happens when I start speaking to Mr. Coopy. So we start to have these conversations, and all sorts of things start coming in, like tactics cards and character cards and campaign systems, and we forget what we're supposed to be talking about.
I was just about to jump in there and go, you basically just described what I wrote down about 3 years ago.
Oh, did I? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Right. Well, you better stick the copyright on that one quicker then.
No, I was thinking, I could just send it to you because I think you probably end up doing it. But
yeah. Well, I suppose that's one of the things. I mean, it was just interesting. Right? It was one of the things. It's the one thing we actually, when we did sort of the history of how I've sort of my wargaming history, the one bit we actually never sort of did is how I got involved with Westwind or Forged in Battle. In essence, and then how I ended up in this terrifying position I am now of writing this rule set that's going to be given to the war game, issued to the wargaming public at some time to hopefully play and enjoy in the future.
Antony, how did you get involved with Westwind?
It was all the Incursion Kickstarter's fault.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So Kickstarter, a wargamer's curse, another source of the addiction. I actually backed the Incursion Kickstarter, and because I'd had the board game previously, really enjoyed it, quite like the idea of the figures and everything and what they were doing. And being a typical wargaming butterfly, I thought, well, what else can I do with all these figures? And looking through the Kickstarter comments and things like that, saw references to Secrets of the Third Reich. So spoke to Wendy, got the rules, and had a few chats with her. And then sort of a few months later, knowing that Westwind were going to do the fulfillment for Grindhouse in Europe and everything, I rang Wendy up and said, look, I know you're only a small company, that sort of thing. I don't live that far away. When you come to fulfillment, would you like some help? Because fulfillment's a fairly major exercise, because they want to turn the rewards around quite quickly. So Wendy, being the lovely person that she is, said, well, yeah, that'd be great. Why don't you come up and have a chat with us and that sort of thing? So I ended up doing that. I actually then ended up, because I'm fortunate where I don't have to sort of work on a Monday or work a condensed week. I was going up on the Mondays and I was actually helping them get ready for Salute in 2014, getting all the blisters done and the racks and everything set out. Started doing that, and obviously at the time it was when they were dealing with the first iteration of the rules. So I got invited to do some of the playtesting and get involved in some of the conversations. Did put some input into that. Continued to help out. Next thing round came the second iteration of the rules. And in the meantime, Andy and I had been having sort of more and more conversations about War and Empire, the game as such, and what Andy's vision was and what he was trying to achieve. And we began to see that quite a few of our ideas aligned about what we were trying to do. So when Andy was finding that the second iteration wasn't really, it had bits that he liked, but overall it wasn't giving him the feel that he was looking for, because ultimately War and Empire is Forged in Battle's baby. It's their product. And they've got a view of how they want it to develop and what it wants to do. I sort of said to Andy, I said, well, I've seen first iteration, I've seen second iteration, you and I have talked. Do you want me to have a look at those, have a think about it, and see if I can come up with something for you? Because fortunately I was going on holiday for a couple of weeks in Turkey, and spent a lot of time lying by the pool, writing all sorts of notes and coming up with fairly, eureka moments when I'm swimming in the pool about, we could do things this way. And then came back and sort of said to Andy, right, this is the sort of game I think we can do. These are the things. Here's the animus. Here's the order phase. Here's how we use generals, that sort of thing. And he quite liked that. And then we started playing a few games. I got my wargaming buddy here to start playing a few games. And really it's sort of, that's how it grew and sort of evolved through me, from a simple phone call about helping out on Kickstarter fulfillment for Incursion to writing the rules for War and Empire, developing the army lists, and now, which I think is the more gargantuan of all the tasks, is developing the unit cards for, at the moment, of the 31 armies we've got in our army lists.
The unit cards appear quite key to the whole thing.
Yes.
And as you say, where you got 31 armies to go through, that that's a lot of unit cards.
It is, but it's actually, when you actually stand back and begin to look at it, you remember the conversation about the Carthaginians? So you think about the Carthaginians. Well, I've already done the Gauls, so I've already done 3 or 4 unit cards for a Carthaginian army. I've done the Numidian light cavalry to go with the Caesarian Roman, so I've actually done the Numidian light cavalry already. So you actually begin to find with some of the armies that the units cross over. So I do the Spanish unit cards. Well, I've done the Scutari, the Catrati, the long shield, round shield cavalry to go with the Carthaginians and to go with a late Republic Civil War army and all those sort of things. So it is it's a big task, but actually because there are some nice crossovers, then you actually find you begin to eat away at certain armies quite quickly. So everybody used Cretan archers. So once you've got the Cretan archers, you've got the Cretan archers. Tarentine light cavalry when you're towards the successive periods and that sort of thing, then, they appear in different armies, that sort of stuff. So it is big. I think the hardest thing with the unit cards, in some ways is the special rules. Because it is, as we alluded to, it's the special rules within the unit card and how that unit then fights above and beyond its stats that gives the character to the army. And then once we maybe introduce things like the character cards and maybe the army tactic cards, you'll develop that character even more. So, we've got a nice sort of development path for those sort of things. Now we're introducing, Legions of Rome. I'll be having that list of 31 armies will begin to extend, as we cover all the new ones, hopefully, that Forged in Battle will be able to produce.
Okay, so moving back to Andy. Obviously, we've been talking an awful lot about various things that are included and are required as part of the rules and how the various different variations are going to work, especially with the unit cards being fairly key to the way the game works, and also these orders cards. Are they going to be included as part of the rules, or it almost sounds like, especially if you've got unit cards which are specific to a particular army, how is all that going to work? How is all that going to be made available?
Okay, so it is complicated, isn't it? Right now, we've just got the ability to have PDF download done from our website, which we haven't had before. Because
because you've got a brand new website.
We got a brand new website coming, yeah. So the reason we went to this new website is because the original hosting software wouldn't allow us to do PDFs as downloadable documents from the site. I mean, we could have links and things like that, but not, we couldn't have them as paid-for product, if you like. So,
right.
Once we get the core rules absolutely rock solid, they'll be on there as a PDF, a free-to-download PDF. Okay? And we want to treat it as a living document because there's so many variables when you're designing wargames rules, situations that you don't even consider. So we don't want a huge list of, questions about how does this work against this, how does that work against that, and constantly adding to that. So we want to constantly update the sort of core rule book until it's in a state where we can actually get it printed. Yeah.
So I was going to say, if you're producing it as a living document, I was about to ask, what impact does that have on printing and a potential printing schedule?
Oh well, yeah. We'll draw a line under it. We'll get it to a stage where we're like, okay, we think everybody's had their say on the rules, and this is how they're going to be. This is going to be a sort of the final fixed version, and then we'll go print with it. The way we'll deal with the army is the army list will be separate from the rule book. Okay, so your first century Romans, whatever it is, it'll have its own PDF document. Yeah, and on that document it will deal with. It'll have the army cards, it'll have the organization and the army list, so the organization. And you can just print and play that. Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
So if you need 2 copies of it, you can just print it twice.
Right.
Yeah, and if we need to make if somebody comes up with, oh, well, this is really screwy, and it doesn't work, or that's really stupid, then we can go in and change it.
Now, obviously, from a playing point of view, there are those people who may turn around and go, "Well, hang on a second, I haven't got easy access to a printer. But I still want to be able to play with these rules and what have you. Are you going to potentially look at producing card decks and these unit cards, actually printing them and producing decks of cards to go along with armies, and maybe get to a point where, like, for example, if you purchase an army box for War and Empire, that will include a set of cards, that sort of thing?
We could do, or we could print it on just A4 card stock, and you can just cut the cards out. That's the way of doing it. Well, that way we don't have to. You see, the problem with printing cards is you have to have a die made to cut the card decks out. So and then you've got to have a print run done on the card on the deck.
Yeah.
Yeah. So with doing so many armies, that's going to be quite expensive.
Well, yeah, I must admit, that was something that was in the back of my mind, because where we were already, it's like, okay, so we currently got 23 armies. Well, that's 23 decks before you start, and then obviously we've got the potential for that to grow with the new Legions of Rome
by another 10. Yeah, not counting the just individual Roman armies that are involved in that Legions of Rome. There's kind of 4 different Roman armies.
So, as you say, there is a potential. All of a sudden, you're going to have to produce, 35, 40 decks of cards.
Yeah,
and especially like, you need a command deck as well. As you say, all of a sudden it starts to get a little bit out of hand.
That goes a bit crazy. Yeah, that's why we needed the PDF download situation.
Well, so you can just point them towards that that firm that Mike knows about, the little pinch your cards.
Yeah, you can. You can get print on demand services and stuff like that.
Okay, so basically, at the point where you're happy to initially publish War and Empire, it will be available for free download and play, and there'll be a period of feedback. Yeah. Okay, and once that period has been gone through, is the plan then to actually produce a rule book in the same way that you've done with something like, say, for example, Empire of the Dead?
Yeah. Well, we'd produce. It would be an A5 format. The reason we go for A5 format, it's smaller table, to flick through and carry around as opposed to A4. Plus, the same format goes into tablet size, so you can. You can go from spreads to single pages and export it as a PDF, low-res PDF document, and you can just use it on your iPad. And if we do an iPad version, then we can build in smart links and things like that, where you can just flick to from the contents page. The bookmarks at the front. You can just click on the section you want to read.
So when do you think the sort of beta version is going to be out for for the public to see?
It should be before Christmas, actually. I think Antony's just sort of finishing up a few things. It's a lot of it's just kind of the way things are worded.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of that one explained particularly well, or I don't understand that. So we kind of got to cover all that.
So hopefully, when people are listening to this, we could possibly have a beta version pretty much imminent, ready for them to download and start playing with.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we should hopefully get some videos done as well if I've got time. We can pop them on the Kickstarter or on the website so people can see how. That'll be kind of the key point as well. If you can get some video stuff done, it explains a lot of the concepts more. If you can see somebody doing it, it's a lot easier than sort of going, well, you do this, you do that.
Yeah, I think so, what we're seeing that other companies have produced different parts of how to play videos.
Yeah,
I've certainly seen for feedback that's been given to those that people find them incredibly useful.
Yeah, because sometimes trying to read a set of rules, it takes some doing. You sort of sit there trying to read through this wonderful logic, and you just drift off. But once you see it, once you play the game, or once you've had it explained to you, then it's a lot easier to go back in and read a set of rules.
Yeah. I mean, what we're trying to make with this game is we're trying to make it as accessible as possible, so you could pick it up. Somebody who's never played a war game before could pick it up, hopefully. That's why when we designed the quick reference sheet, what we're going to do is leave a section blank, and that's where you place your reference card. So if you've got a unit reference card, and when Antony talks about cards, he's only talking about that specific type of unit. It's not like every single unit gets a card. It just covers that unit type. So if it's Roman legions, you have one card which tells you what a cohort does. Yeah, you don't need one for each unit kind of thing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and then you just pop that card on your quick reference sheet, and the stat line leads right into the quick reference section. So if you're fighting combat, you can just go down through the stat line, and it works.
Okay, so here's a perhaps a silly question. Why produce them as unit cards and not just have it as other rule sets have produced them, and have you basically have a unit description and a stat line?
Because they got on the flip side, they got special rules for that unit. So you don't want to. Do you want to be? You could have it all on a sheet, I suppose, in front of you, and just refer to the sheet.
I guess it's a difference. In some armies, you're going to have maybe 10 or 15, 10 different types of units, but in your game, you may be playing with 5.
Yeah.
This is something that a perfect example is World War II gaming. When there's so many different stats out there for every single different vehicle. In some rule sets, you've got pages and pages of all the stats. When you're playing a game, you've probably got 4 or 5, and you're constantly flicking back and forth.
Trying to fight, Where on earth was it? Is the stat for the Sherman Firefly? I'm sure it's around here somewhere.
Yeah. What sort of ammunition is it firing, and what?
Yeah, and all that. Whereas, if you condense your army down to what you're playing, and you got 6 or 7 different types of units, and you got 6 or 7 cards, it's easy because it's just there in front of you.
It's really easy. You don't forget it. It's just like, I've got to look up this unit and look, what's its special, or where is it? Page this. No, it's just there. You just put it behind the unit. Or you don't. Or if you don't want to use the card, don't use them. Just leave them on the sheet. Don't come out.
Well, there is that as well.
Yeah.
So, Legions of Rome.
Yeah.
Because we have touched on it briefly. So, it's a new Kickstarter. Taking on from basically it's War and Empire Part 2.
Yeah.
Yeah, first century onwards. Why did you decide to do first century onwards? Was it just because it was the next logical stepping stone, or is it because you always wanted to do Romans?
It's the next logical step. They run sequentially, and so many people asked me for it. You wouldn't believe it.
Oh, I could believe it.
Yeah.
I dare say what actually probably the feedback you probably got when you did the first Roman Empire. When you did the first War and Empire, most people would turn around and go, "Why are you doing this period? Why aren't you doing Imperial Rome?"
Well, what they generally said is, these Romans, are they the ones with the square, the rectangular shields and the Lorica segmentata? And I'm like, no, these are Republican Romans and, Caesarian Romans. And they couldn't, I think people just go, oh, Romans, and they just assume that they're first century guys. So we know we've got to do first century.
Yeah. It's one of those armies that if you're in the business, you tend to end up doing, don't you? Because there's an awful lot of firms out there who've done Roman, ranges. But I don't know many in the sort of 15mm market who have gone for the sort of level of detail that you're going for in this next one. Because as you say, most of them tend to do, they'll do Republican, they'll do the standard Imperial Romans, and maybe a post-Roman sort of Romano-British sort of style army.
Yeah.
But
we've pretty much covered it in depth, starting with the Augustan stuff right through. So, I don't know how many people would want to do the Augustans, to be honest with you, but they're there if people want to model that army.
Yeah, and you've got some quite specific ones in there as well, especially when you cover in sort of the Near East. Because again, that's another sort of period of Rome that, again, people tend to sort of keep away from.
What we end up getting the split between the two,
yeah.
Well, you mean the Dromedarii and all that kind of stuff, yeah. Well, it's interesting. I mean, all this stuff is actually done. The models are sculpted, yeah. I think there's a little bit left to do on some of the command sets, and the cavalry, but everything is done. So
the
Kickstarter's not about funding the sculpting; it's about funding the mold making process and in the pre-production sort of run.
Oh, I see. So, given the fact that the last time you did this, you ended up in a situation where you had to kind of then go away for 6 months and finish sculpting everything.
Yeah.
You kind of got ahead of the game a little bit.
I did, yeah. So, I mean, the problem with the last time was when we came back to, we'd had stuff done, and we'd sculpted stuff. But when we came, where I was at sculpting wise, it was like, because the stuff was done a couple of years before, the early stuff, it didn't really match in with the style that I was sculpting in. So it was like, oh, well, I'm going to do it again.
Oh, no.
Yeah. Well, I'm just like, perfectionist on that. I don't want to put, you do the Carthaginian spearman, and it's like, they don't fit for those guys. And, do them again. That's just the way it is. But this time, we got ahead of the game, so I've been sculpting for about 3 or 4 months, Romans and stuff, other stuff. And we got a lot of it painted, actually, so we should be showing it as we go through the Kickstarter.
Are you going to do what you did with the first one, where you had sort of predefined army sets? Because I found it really useful, because I do like the early Greek and Persian wars, but I'm not an expert on it.
Right.
Yeah, and I sort of sat there, and I tried to do Greek and Persian armies years ago.
Yeah.
And I couldn't get anywhere because all the manufacturers out there just had all these different names to what was in the army lists in the rulebooks, and I didn't know what they were.
Right.
And that's why I liked One Empire, because I could sit there and go, okay, that's a Persian army, that's a Greek army, so I'll have one of those and one of those. And then, and it just made it easier for somebody like me who sort of had an idea what they wanted but didn't know about the history to actually get a good grounding in an army in one easy click. So are you going to be doing something?
Yes. Oh, yeah, we've already done the army composition for those. So, yeah, we've got all the starter army all worked out. We've got them on a spreadsheet. So they'll be in the, when we put the pledge manager together, they'll be in there.
That'll be really useful, because I must admit, I'm probably one of the only war games out there who really isn't that excited by Romans. I don't know what it is. But the earlier stuff,
you heretic!
I know. I just don't get them. But the later stuff, the early medieval, I really like, and obviously the really early sort of biblical time, I really like. If I was interested in Romans and I hadn't bought any, being able to just buy an army box, and say, well, okay, that's my pledge. Bang, I've got an army, and away you go. It's a great concept.
Yeah, I think it covers it. I mean, in the way, we settled on 24s and 12s for packs because it kind of breaks down. So if you need an extra few figures, or a few less for a different game, I'm talking about for different games, so it breaks down into divisions of 4s and 8s for the basics.
Anything that's in the sort of dozen era, it just breaks down easily, doesn't it? Instead of digital.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, as you say, as far as your basing conventions are concerned, I mean, I was pleased to see that you've kind of stayed with the basing convention that most people are familiar with. I suppose it goes back to DBA, WRG sort of areas, but that 40mm frontage.
Yeah, if it ain't broke, we're not going to try and fix it. We won't try and change what everybody's got, so other people can use the miniatures in our.
Yeah, well, I suppose it's one of these things. Again, it actually makes the rule sets more viable as a rule set in itself, as a separate entity from the figures. I mean, yes, it's all part and parcel of you have a set of rules, and you want to use that with an associated range of figures, but it also means that it does, and so you do have that separate case of, well, okay, because you're using, I suppose, what is effectively a standard basing system, that it does mean that people can just buy the set of rules.
Yeah, it translates from that.
Yeah. They should be available in time for Christmas.
Yeah.
And then the cut-off point for them potentially producing a print set of rules. Any thoughts?
Next summer, I would have thought. The print
summer.
sort of thing. That's thing about.
And is that likely to be a softback or hardback?
It would be softback, yeah. Full colour softback. I mean, we could look at doing a hardback version, but, it's just going to make it more expensive. So what I'm thinking is, depending on the page count and the printing cost, I'm trying to keep the price pretty low, to make it accessible.
Yeah, and to be fair, if you're doing an A5, it's probably going to dance like easy to an A5 softback as opposed to an A5 hardback, isn't it?
Oh yeah.
Excellent. So, other than sculpting lots and lots of 50mm stuff, you've been a bit busy as well in other things. I've seen a few releases coming out for Empire of the Dead. I've been sort of sneaking out.
Bringing War Machines out, yeah. Again, that's tied into the new website. We got so we brought out penny farthings and kind of Victorian steam tanks, land dreadnoughts, and I think is it called the Tankovsky? Yeah, it's kind of like a handsome tank. That's the word I'm looking for.
Yes.
Oh right, yes.
Yeah, the steam-driven handsome carriage, but that's kind of metal iron plated. But we've got rules book. We've got a rules come for that, and that's a free PDF on our new website. So all the rules that you need for those are on there.
That's an improvement over where we've gone before, where at one point in Empire Dead Range, you did have a situation where you had models with no rules and rules for models that didn't exist. And yeah, as you say, with this, I suppose it just kind of helps to tie this whole thing together more, doesn't it?
Yeah. I mean, it's a pretty huge range. It's a massive range. It's got to be the biggest sort of steampunk Victorian Gothic range out there.
Yeah. Okay, so since we're talking about War and Empire, and I mean, okay, we're doing Legions of Rome, but I seem to remember we were going through when we were going through Empire of the Dead. At one point, there was a certain mention of Mars. That was it.
Mars,
Mars. So, are we going to go there? Any thoughts on timescales on that?
Oh, put me on the spot there, Neil. Oh.
Well, I thought, I do this.
I like the idea. And I've got Sam, who wrote the original Empire of the Dead rulebook. He was working on it's kind of a more of a mass. It's not a mass battle, but about 40 figures a side kind of size games. Yeah. So it's like colonial Mars kind of thing. In Empire of the Dead, we take it a bit further because Mars has been colonized. This is the idea. Mars is colonized. There are remnants of the original Martians still knocking around. So, the War of the Worlds fighting machine Martian type characters. Yeah. And they've left lots of the previous remnants of previous civilizations that have existed on Mars that the War Machine guys wiped out. And the War Machine guys create these cities that kind of, like Mount Olympus Mons on Mars. Well, that's actually a city, a Martian city in the background.
Oh, okay.
So all these kind of huge mountains are actually the original Martian cities. And it's about trying to recover technology from the Martians. That kind of game. And that's what we have in mind. So you have things like, British infantry and rebreather masks and with electric rifles and things like that, and Prussians with, same sort of thing.
Yeah. Sounds like the possibility of a large range in store.
It is, yeah. That's what, so we'd have to, we've got a whole Martian fighting machine stuff. I've got a lot of concept work done for it. Again, it depends on other things. It's kind of on the back burner, Neil, so we can't actually focus on it. Got to get War and Empire 2 up and running, out to everybody out in the real world. I've got to give Secrets some love. Secrets of the Third Reich.
Funny shit. Secrets of the Third Reich. I was just looking back, and when did we chat? It was episode 145, which, funny enough, was just after Salute.
It would have been Salute, yeah. It would have been.
Yeah, we actually did an interview with you. Back. So we're looking at May this year.
Mm-hmm.
and that was when we were looking at Secrets of the Third Reich 2 and looking at launching. Well, you launched a Kickstarter, which, sad to say, very quickly ceased to be a Kickstarter. Can you kind of let us into anything about kind of what happened with that? Because I know it was I must admit it came as a huge surprise to me when it actually got canned, because it seemed that it had only been going for like a week.
It has been going for a week. Yeah, it had been going for a week. It lost traction completely in the second week, and I've been run 2 Kickstarters. I've never experienced that before, where it just kind of goes and stops, and each day I was kind of going on there putting up unique pledge levels. Now, the unique pledge levels were kind of like signed pieces of artwork from the original Secrets of the Third Reich book, and that's what was keeping the whole total kind of just creeping up a little bit. And I think the problem that we had was we weren't getting new players coming in. Yeah.
Right.
So we have got a good loyal fan base that came in and supported it, but then that was kind of, it just stopped. And so then you kind of got to sit there and think, what do you do? Do you carry on and hope that it reaches its total, which it had about another £7,000 to sort of reach its total.
Yeah.
Which I don't know. I don't know if it was going to do that. So it's either cancel it and go back to the drawing board, which is part of the problem was that it wasn't just the rule book that people were wanting. They were needing these. They were all kind of coming on from what talking to people and reading the comments and things. They wanted the U.S. Marine Corps stuff, and they wanted the Japanese Army. Now, truth be told, I'd costed all this stuff beforehand, so I knew what it was going to cost to get all that stuff sculpted, done, and in production, and the number is kind of like, we were nowhere near getting that going. And to do an army, you got to do the army. You know what I mean? I can't just go, here's the U.S. Marine Corps platoon, because that doesn't. You can't build an army in secrets off that. You need the entire army. You see what I'm saying? So it's kind of
It's not just the platoon. You need all the support related to it, and the associated heroes and everything else.
Everything. You need all the weird things. So it's catch-22 for me. I'm kind of caught in a catch-22 situation. Yeah, I'm damned if I do, and I'm damned if I don't. Because if I commit to it and open it up, I'm committed to producing the Japanese and the US Marines, but without the resources to actually do it.
Yeah.
That is the thing. It's, when it comes to Kickstarters, it's probably not so much the money that you make, it's the number of backers that you get, because it's the number of backers which is key, isn't it?
You need backer churn. Yeah, you need that. Yeah. You need that churn, and you need that interest. That's why and that's why it was kind of a hard decision to make. But in the end, you've got to sort of go, right, okay. Looking at this really logically, this is what we have to do. And so then it's kind of like, go back to the drawing board and think about how we actually take it, make it work, get it out there. So do we go, okay, well, we're just going to do the rules and come back and do the rules? Well, it doesn't really, I can't get my head around just doing that. I want to do the weird stuff. I want to do all the stuff that goes with that. So unfortunately, the only other way of doing it, well, actually, there's 2 ways of doing it. I can do it the traditional way and bring bits out when I can bring bits out, get them sculpted, get them produced, and then bring them out on a regular basis over a couple of years. But that, people have waited quite a long time anyway for Secrets too, and I don't think that, the interest would be there to sort of sustain it over that a long time period. The other way of approaching it is to break the Kickstarter down into several Kickstarters and then kind of go, well, here's a Kickstarter just for the core rulebook. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Here's Kickstarter for the Japanese Army and the Japanese Army book. Here's a Kickstarter for the US Marine Corps and the US Marine Army book. We can do it that way. And anything else that gets produced, kind of like German plasma troops or any weird stuff, well, we just PDF that and put it in a PDF download document. That way people got access to it.
I suppose the one problem with doing the breakdown in Kickstarter is as soon as you say, we're going to do a Kickstarter just for Japanese, people turn on and go, well, who are they going to fight against?
Exactly, yeah. So it's quite tricky to get it. You think people think, well, just do it. Well, you can't. You got to think.
You can't.
No, you can't just do that on its own. It doesn't stand on its own. Yeah, and the Japanese is actually the biggest list because that's got all the weird monsters in it.
Yeah, and in World War II, they only really fought against the Americans and the Brits and the Russians towards the end. So it's a difficult one. You need to be able to pair it against an existing force that you've got.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I suppose you could do something like, let's do like the Secrets of the Third Reich equivalent of Manchuria. So they're going to be fighting against the Russians. So you've got some Russians already. So okay, this is the initial part of the Japanese against the...
We sort of had a rationale to get the Japanese so they could fit on fight in various different environments as well. And this was that the Japanese had developed this technology whereby it's like a dimension gate technology, so they can move vast distances. And it's a bit of a workaround, really,
Yeah.
But part of their actual mythos as well, part of the weird sort of side of things is when they pass through those gates, they don't realise that things pass into this world kind of thing. Yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So that's the whole Japanese kind of background. All the weird spirit monsters and all that kind of stuff.
But I guess, either way, whichever way you're doing it, you're looking at about a year's worth of work, aren't you? Pretty much constantly.
Easily. That's easily a work. And that's including, the 2 books to lay out and then 2 armies to design. And those 2 armies have got to go in the second book. Yeah.
Yeah, so
yeah.
It's a massive time sink and a massive, financial risk.
Oh, huge commitment, and it just couldn't be done on that, within that Kickstarter. It just wasn't going to happen.
At least you were brave enough to actually cancel it.
I know. A lot of people, it was a big step for us to do. We really thought about it, and we sort of tried working ways around it, but no.
Well, because obviously there's a certain amount of, for want of a better phrase, stigma and flack involved in turning around and then going, well, actually, this isn't going to happen. And especially with the fact of it had only been a week or so that it had been running. So, as you say, even at that point, you're kind of thinking, this isn't going to fly. There are obviously certain backers who are somewhat bewildered by what's going on, and I know we've had this conversation in the past where you've been chatting about, well, the way the Westwind's business model is working at the moment. You're looking at crowdfunding simply because of the size of ranges that you want to produce.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. To commit, you've got to have resources, and we needed that resource. Yeah. Yeah, it's just the way it is.
There is a concept in programming which is fail fast. So if something isn't going to work, you get out of it really early and you regroup and you do it again. So
I agree. Yeah.
I mean, personally, I would prefer to see somebody take that big decision and go, actually, guys, this isn't working, rather than get the initial funding in and then fail later on and end up with people not getting what they pledged for.
Yeah, I mean, there's recently some massive Kickstarters, and I don't say this won't happen to me, but some massive Kickstarters have sort of not done what they said they were going to do.
Oh, just so. Sorry, I'm just had a cough there. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for that, Mike.
No, but we 100% commit and we 100% fulfill. So there you go. That's what we do.
Well, I backed you twice.
Yeah.
And I've got to say, in both occasions, everything arrived pretty much on time, but everything arrived together, beautifully packed, and pretty much most of it's been painted and actually used.
Wow. You're unique.
Yeah, it's very unusual for me. Although I have still got half a box of the Requiem stuff, which I'm still working my way through. But, on that side.
Pretty good going, yeah.
It's because I got a guy who paints for me.
Right, fair enough.
Yeah. I'll mention now, Andy. Just don't go there with me. Although it has to be said. Actually, the 40 Battle Germans are doing really well at the moment. I do. I'm in that strange position of actually painting figures at the moment. Right. So painting up the 40 Battle Germans. Just don't ask about Empire of the Dead at the moment.
Well,
I found the box. I found the box the other day and went, "Oh yeah, that's where they went."
There they are. Well, we've got some more Forging Battle World War II stuff coming as well. That won't be out till later on, sort of after Easter next year, I wouldn't have thought.
Oh yeah, what are you doing?
Well, we've got a lot more tanks and we've got a lot more infantry. So we've got some Japanese stuff coming and some US Marines in 15 mil. We've got some Winter War stuff for the Germans in greatcoats and Americans in greatcoats and things like that. What else have we got? Chindits. I'm trying to think of the list. Yeah, I think that much covers it.
There you go, Andy. Why don't you just do Secrets of the Third Reich 2 in 15 mil?
Yeah, we thought about that. We did consider doing it in 15 mil, but then, it's kind of a completely new game.
Mm.
Yeah.
And you also risk alienating your current fan base, don't you?
Well, that's it, yeah. I mean, but I can just see kind of, you've kind of got, what would they call them? Not squadrons with tanks, squadrons of mecha, Tiger mechs, Tiger mechs, and things like that. That look pretty cool, 15 mil. But nah, don't go there.
We talked about what happened with Secrets, but you say, oh yeah, we've got to go back to it.
Yeah.
Okay, and we talked about the things you can possibly do.
Yeah.
Is it still a case of, obviously, we've got Legions of Rome to go through and sort out.
Yeah.
Once that's done, is Secrets the next thing to look at?
It probably is, yeah. Whether that's a kickbatter or not, I can't say. Probably not. It's probably more likely to come out in the traditional route, like I say. We've actually got a new thing coming out. When we launch the new website, there's a new scenario on there, a new scenario set, and it's called Ruin de Britannia, and it's a brand new Secrets scenario, and it deals with it's kind of the Temple. I don't know if you know it's Secrets, that you know who the Temple are in Secrets.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, Mr. Smythe and the Temple, the sort of like the evil Secret Service sort of stuff.
Yes.
It's them versus the British Home Guard in the ruin of London.
Oh right. Oh, that'll be interesting.
Yeah, so it's like Dad's Army versus the British, the British Secret Service. But it's quite good. It's a good set of scenarios written by John Austin. So you'll be able to download that, and that's a free download as well. So that's kind of like a sort of thank you for supporting us kind of thing on the Kickstarter.
Cool.
Mm. Sounds good.
Guys, well, thank you for coming on the show. It's been great to chat and find out all about what's been happening at Westwind, and especially everything that's been happening with War and Empire. And Andy, for teasing us with potentially what's coming out in the future. So thanks very much for chatting to us. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, you're welcome.
All the best with the new Legions of Rome Kickstarter. So we look forward to catching up with you again soon. In the meantime, say all the best with everything, and great to chat. Thanks for coming on the show.
Okay, guys. Thank you very much for having us on. And Merry Christmas to everybody as well.
And Happy New Year.
Yeah,
indeed.
That's true,
yes,
yeah.
Merry Christmas. Okay, cheers.
Bye, guys.
That was all right, wasn't it?
Yeah. Nice quick chat.
Nice quick chat, plus 20 minutes spent talking about siege rules.
I think it's important.
I think he got a bit carried away.
But there's never really been a game that's done sieges. No, sieges are very important. Nobody's ever done them in a war game.
So have you found your rules now?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you found your siege rules?
Well, 3 pages of it, yeah. Just my ideas.
Well, so if you're interested in siege rules, you heard it here first. We may have a situation where Mike and Antony are collaborating on some siege rules. So there you go.
I don't think it's going to go that far. I might just send them over to him and say, "Do you want these for anything?"
Well, I mean, from the sound of the conversation we just had, you were kind of halfway there, you know.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
It's similar ideas, yeah.
Yeah. So, having seen, as Antony described it, the beta version of War and Empire, I mean, certainly some interesting ideas.
Yeah, I've got to say, I'm normally not a fan of big battle games that use small bases or use multi bases in a unit.
Yeah.
'Cause I like to. I like the impetus style and the sword and spear style of having a single base and that's it. But they're doing something with the bases. The bases, how you set the bases up in the unit is important. And I like that idea. I like the idea of saying, okay, I'm bringing my Trelawney forward. So changing the figures in the base. Sorry, the figures in the unit. To represent that, it's a great little idea.
Yeah, that idea of representing a Republican Roman cohort, rather than representing it as 3 different units, 2 mediums and a heavy, for example. Yeah. All of a sudden it becomes, it's one unit because that's the way it fought with 3 or 4 different bases, but you can switch them around. And that was and in the same way, bringing fresh troops forward and in the way that all that works, even with different war bands and the potential they were talking about with how you can then change the makeup of units by putting different figures in the same unit. The classic thing of having both archers and spearmen in the same unit. Really, really interesting.
It's a good idea, because like you say, you either get one base is one thing, so it might be a cohort of Romans, and you just put however many you want on that base, but it's a base of cohort, which I like. Or you get rules where you have multiple bases and you take bases off just to represent casualties, which I don't like, because I don't think units, when you're playing a big battle, I don't think units get smaller. They may lose troops, but physically their sort of zone of control, I don't think, diminishes. And they just get to a stage and they just break, or they pull back, or they basically pull out a battle. I like the ideas that Antony's got, of using the bases to actually represent something in the actual game, and how you set them up is how they basically fight. So, yeah, good one.
Yeah, I was particularly interested in the way that they're looking at marketing this, with a basic turning around and saying, well, essentially it's going to be free. It's going to be free for 6 months, or thereabouts. While they actually put it, they put it out and get people's ideas and say, okay, this is what we think it should be, but what do you think? Really interesting. Yeah, as I say, as opposed to just producing a rule book.
Yeah, public betas are always good. That's always good as long as you've got somebody who's strong, who's writing the rules. And I think Antony's pretty strong in what he wants. Because if you get a weak rules writer who tries to basically change the rules every 2 minutes
to please whoever shouts loudest,
then that's a bit of a mockery, and you end up with a nothing set of rules that nobody really understands, apart from the one person who's shouting loudest. So getting public input on a set of rules is really, really important. But it's having the strength to turn around and go, actually, no, this is why I'm doing it. So this is staying in there.
Yeah, this is it. Yeah, I suppose it's a case of you turn around and go, okay, well, these are the core mechanics. These things aren't changing. However, these other things are open to, are open to question, interpretation, or what have you. So, so it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to see what they're like when they come out. And I say it's interesting the fact that I suppose essentially we've had 3 sets of ancient rules released with, effectively within the space of a month or so of each other. I say, especially with, when they're talking about the fact that these are coming out fairly imminently, or certainly by New Year they should be out. That's what he was saying. And of course, we just had, as we were saying at the top of the show, we just had Aurelian, obviously we just had the second edition of Sword and Spear come out. Good time to be an Ancients player.
It is, yeah. And the other game that seems to be taking off quite a lot, especially down our club, is Art de la Guerre.
What's French?
Art de la Guerre. I think it's the Art of War.
Art of War.
In French.
Yes.
But I can't speak French because I'm Welsh. Guerre. Loads of people play now. They had a bit of an event down the club, and it was like playing any rules.
I must admit, I've not come across that one.
Yeah, and that was just a club night. It was, yeah. It looks a bit DBA-ish to me.
Yeah.
Which has put me off here, if I'm being honest. But everyone seems to be playing it, so I'm going to get one of the guys to give me a demo, and maybe we can have a chat about it in next year. But
yeah, it sounds good. Yeah, no, that sounds good. Yeah, so look out for it. But I mean, interestingly, obviously, since we recorded that interview, the War Empire Kickstarter has gone live, and it's doing all right, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, at the moment, there's 14 days left as of today, and they're up to 25 grand. So they've hit their funding target.
They funded in 3 hours, didn't they?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, it's been going well.
Good steady progress.
Yeah, and quite interestingly, we were just before we came on, and obviously just before we had the interview, we were actually talking about Aurelian, and one of the things is the fact that part of the Kickstarter is going to be looking at now producing 3rd century Romans.
Yeah, and give Andy his due. He's actually turned around and went, we are going to do 1st century Romans, and have you actually looked at Aurelian? And here's a link. And I like that. Any figure manufacturer will turn around and go, okay, we're doing this for our set of rules, but there's also this set of rules that just come out. So these figures that we're going to produce will be perfect for them. That's good.
Yeah, fair game to him. Fair game, fair dues. Yes, so yeah, that's going well. I mean, the big thing is it's funded, so it's definitely happening. They've still got quite a way to go. I think what is it? Sassanid Persians up next, is it?
No. Actually, next one is the 1st century Romans.
Sorry, 3rd century Romans.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's 3rd century Romans, and then potentially 3rd century Sassanid Persians.
Yeah.
So that ought to come, but considering the way the Kickstarter is going at the moment, that seems to be well within its capability. So yeah, go and check that out. Fortunately, Battle Romans look really, really good. Certainly going to have a look. The figures are looking very, very nice indeed.
Yeah, no, they do look good. He's put some pictures up of painted ones. He's also, which is quite nice, he's also re-releasing, well, not re-releasing. He's allowing you to buy some of the armies from the first Kickstarter they did for One Empire, the earlier ones. But they've added in some extra packs as well, so they've been extending those ranges.
Oh right, okay. Oh, that's
so
cool.
Yeah, that's really good. So for example, for the early Persians, they're doing a new pack of the Power Bar foot archers, which I'll definitely have to get, and then rebase all the ones I got, so I can have the shields at the front and then foot archers behind them.
Look, what do you mean, like what Antony suggested? Yeah,
but on the same base.
Yes.
Yeah, so they're just extending what they've done. So they've done the summations, or they've done the early summations, but they're doing a new pack of later summation lancers as well into that. So that's another army for Aurelian. But yeah, they're doing lots. It's a nice looking Kickstarter.
But that's okay because you're not doing Romans, are you?
Well,
Sorry, you weren't doing Romans.
I wasn't doing Romans.
However,
I thought I'd get one of the pledges just so I could maybe extend the armies that I got.
Yeah.
But as part of me actually fancies doing Maccabean Jewish.
Oh right, okay, Jewish Rebellion. Ooh.
Yeah, but then again, I think maybe I'll just I might actually get 2 armies for Aurelian and actually move up the years from my usual sort of ancient Greek and Persian fancy. Maybe I should try this Roman thing that all you cool kids keep going on about.
Failing that, you just can't say no to some. You just can't say no to some cool figures, can you?
Yeah, there is that.
There is that.
I was going to say it doesn't really help. I've just been listening to like a 10-hour podcast by Dan Carlin about the Republican Roman era, and that's really piqued my interest.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I must say I don't fancy the classical Roman period, the sort of first, second century, I suppose. You know, the big square shield. But there's something about the early Republican or the later Romans, you know, when the armies were completely different. Because, I mean, the later Romans, the armies were almost sort of Celtic-like in their makeup, weren't they?
Yeah.
So that kind of appeals to me, that sort of period of time. So, yeah.
I quite like, even my major interest is kind of Mammalian Roman. And even at that point, you got, there were so many. Basically, there were so many different troop types in the army because, you know, obviously you got the Rome, you got your Roman core legionaries, but you've got Spanish in there, you've got the Gallic cavalry in there. There's all sorts of bits and pieces going on.
Yeah,
it does make for a really interesting army. So, so I mean, that's kind of what really interested me as well. So, something a bit different from just early Imperial Rome.
Yeah, the classic square shield ones.
Yeah, so there you go. War Empire, really good sets of ancient figures, interesting looking set of rules, which are going to be free to download. Hopefully, not soon after you've listened to this podcast. Yeah, so lots and lots happening, all in time for Christmas. Yeah. So Christmas, cool. Christmas and the new year and a new year of podcasting. Cool. Right. It will be 2016, and amazingly enough, Meeples and Miniatures will be heading into its 8th year. No, sorry, 9th. Hang on, no, 9th year.
Yeah.
9th year. Scary. Now. We'll probably get to talk about this a little bit more as we go into it. But myself, what?
I was going to say, shall we save this for the Christmas show?
We could. I suppose we could. Yeah, go on then. Yeah,
because this is a very long one, isn't it?
This is quite a long one. Yeah.
And most people, this is 3 hours in now. Most of these people are fast asleep.
That's very
hunched
true.
Over their painting desks or trying to drive to that meeting.
Okay. Okay. Right. So, a teaser for the Christmas show. We have had a chat, and we're looking at kind of changing things just a little bit for the new year. Hopefully, not for the worse. He says,
"Yeah,
yeah." But anyway, no. We've been having quite a few chats in the background about the whole thing. So we'll tease you with that and say, we've got some ideas on a few things that are changing for 2016, but we'll tell you more about it next time round.
Indeed.
Of course, by the time you hear the next one, Christmas will have been gone, and because the next one is. I suppose it's the Meeples and Miniatures New Year parties, the next one we'll be recording. So be warned, because I'm thinking that, especially with one thing or another, that will probably go out unedited. I think I won't risk it. Yeah, so that might be interesting. Be warned in advance. But we're going to be recording that and putting that out sometime between Christmas and New Year, or at least very early into the New Year. So look out for that in a couple of weeks' time. I suppose all that's left is to say Happy Christmas to everybody.
Oh yeah, Merry Christmas.
Because that'll be it. I mean, this is the last time you listen to us before Christmas. So, greetings of the season. I hope you have a good time in whatever way you choose to celebrate the holiday season. And we'll speak to you again around about New Year. So here we are. We got to here we are. The Christmas issue, and I'm amazed with the fact that we've actually pretty much kept up with our recording schedule almost all year.
Yay!
Well, although it has to be said that is all the credit to you, and that is all the credit to you. You've been cracking the whip all year.
No. I can't take all the credit. I just nag people until they do what I want.
You don't see all the nagging emails that come out going, right, okay, it's a very about time we did another show. We've got to do this. We've got to do that. Let's get ourselves organised. Right, here's what we're doing. Yeah. Once a week we get a nagging email from Mike saying, okay, go on, let's get it sorted out. So Mike has been keeping us all organised in the background. So Mike, thank you so much for all the work you put in this year, mate. Really appreciate it.
That's okay.
And on that note, yes, until next time, thank you once again for listening. I hope you've enjoyed it, and thank you for listening throughout the year. And we shall catch up with you. We shall catch up with you at Christmas. We shall catch up with you at New Year.
Yeah.
Yeah. So happy gaming, everybody, and we'll catch you soon.
Hope Santa brings you everything you want.
Indeed. Hope you've been good. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Meeples and Miniatures podcast. If you want to know more about Meeples and Miniatures, there are several things you can do. First of all, you can visit the website at www.meeplesandminiatures.co.uk. If you want to contact the show at all, you can email me at neil@meeplesandminiatures.co.uk. You can follow the show on Twitter. Simply look for M&M Podcast, or click the follow us on Twitter button from the website. We also have a group on Facebook. That's the Meeples and Miniatures Podcast Fan Club. Again, follow the link from the website. And finally, if you want to help us to support the show, you can always donate to the podcast by clicking the PayPal button on the donate page, again found on the website. Once again, thank you for listening. I hope you've really enjoyed the show. Take care, and I'll speak to you soon.